Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're going to start off our Regional Transportation Commission. Can I get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Keeley.
Present.
Commissioner Clark.
Present.
Commissioner Montesino.
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Here.
Commissioner Cummings.
Here.
Commissioner DeSerpa. She's here. Commissioner Martinez.
Present.
Commissioner Vanessa Quiroz Carter.
Here.
And Commissioner Kelly McClendon. Kelly, can you hear us? He's on the line, so we'll work on the.
Okay. Do you have any considerations of AB 2449?
We do not.
Any additions to deletions?
We posted to the website a replacement page for page 1 of the agenda. We have handouts for items 6, 23, and 31. We have handouts for items 29, and we have an attachment for item 31.
Thank you. And with that, this number 4 is oral communication from the public. Anybody like to weigh on items not at the agenda?
Good evening. My name is Bill Beecher. I'm from Aptos. I'm here to talk about the rail trail. You guys put out a hell of a report. I had to do an all-nighter to read it. It's missing something, the financials. Using your numbers, you're going to lose money, but you don't say anything in your presentation about it. You have my presentation in front of you. Let's go through it. Using your numbers, I come up that a fair price to break even with the minimum of 3,500 people a day, you got to charge $12.40 for fare. Or you have to charge $25.50 for a fare if you have 3,500.
Excuse me, can you?
Yeah, I believe these comments are related to an item that's on the agenda this evening.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have to wait for that until that item arrives. This is the topic for items not in the agenda packet.
Okay. Can you tell me which agenda item it is?
Yes, it is item number
31.
31.
I'll be back.
Thank you.
Good comments, though. Hi, Brian Peoples with Trail Now. You know, I first got involved with this organization over 25 years ago. I've been active for 15 years. Trail Now has been here for over 15 years, trying to get the trail built in a cost-effective manner. You know, my wife and I went to Tahoe this weekend, and I went to high school up there. I was there when there was no street light. When we went up there, it was phenomenal infrastructure improvements, roads, roundabouts, and trails. It's just so frustrating to see all the other communities doing what they're doing, and then we come back here, and it's a disaster. 10 years, you built 1.9 miles of trail. Your last trail was $25 million a mile.
It's also part
This
of
is, no, excuse me? You interrupted me, what?
It's also part of the conversation.
No, the trail's not. But this is about Tahoe, and thanks for stopping the clock. Thank you. So the issue is segment 7B was a disaster, and we're tired of that. Thank you.
Anybody else for comments not related to agenda items?
Hello, my name is Brian Shields, field rep with Carpenters Local 646. The Carpenters Union covers pile driving, form work, retaining walls, soldier pile, retention walls, lagging, and all of that. And so I just wanted to let it be known that the Carpenters Union is very interested in the progress of this project, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and for you to listen to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public's not related to any agenda items. Seeing none, I'll bring back anybody online.
Yes. We have David Dean. David, hold on for 1 second. We can't hear you. David, can you try speaking again, please? Okay, give us another minute. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Can you try speaking again, David? No, we can't hear you.
Is there anybody else waiting on?
No, there's nobody else online. Can we come back to him in a minute?
We can come back. To figure. So with that, I'm going to close up public comment on items not on the agenda, and then now our next item is the consent agenda. Any commissioners have any questions on the consent agenda? Comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you. I just had a couple of comments, actually. One is on item number 12, accept information on how the RTC engages community members in development and design review. I wanted to thank the staff for bringing that report back. That was a question that came up from a fellow commissioner in a previous meeting. Really just wondering how the commission responds when we have projects and how we seek feedback for people with accessibility challenges or struggles, and really appreciate the information. It was stuff I hadn't heard before, so thank you for bringing that forward, and thank you for engaging the community. The second and last item I wanted to just highlight is item number 15, which is the accepting the fiscal year 23-24 fiscal audit and the 23-24 audited financial statements for Measure D fund. I just wanted to highlight that that was a really clean audit, and it represents some really good management of funds and compliance with standard financial practices, and wanted to commend the staff for that audit, clean audit. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Seeing none, now I'm going to go out to public comment. Anybody from the public like to weigh on consent agenda? Seeing none, anybody online?
We're still having audio issues. We're having some audio issues.
Okay. So we'll keep moving along. So can I get entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second. So it's been moved in second. And we don't have to take a roll call, or can we just affirmative vote? No roll call. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All those not in favor? Seeing none, motion passes. So with that, we're going to go on to the next item is number 28, Commissioners Report. Any commissioners have something to report out? Seeing none, I do, and just to give you some perspective on the South County group that was working on just right here, along, a few blocks from us on Walker Street, Rodriguez, and to our SERP group that we're dealing with, those issues in the rail line alignment. We had a robust discussion, and not only with the working group, but with the community. We had a couple meetings with the community that were very beneficial. Business owners, people engaged in this conversation. So I think it went very well, and it brought a lot of perspective, and it brought even, I can tell you from at the beginning, I was like, because there's a lot of my areas like, it's going to take parking, so a lot of hesitancy, but working through it, working with the facts and some standards. Like I said, my hesitancy calmed down, came down. So I just want to thank, staff for, dealing with the group on a weekly basis, and answering all the questions from us and the community. So I want to thank you for that. Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you for that report back on your committee. I can share a similar report from the North County focus group. We held a series of very productive meetings. We engaged stakeholders such as the Seaside Company and Roaring Camp and the City of Santa Cruz, and really discussed that there are some serious challenges involving that center or that area around the San Lorenzo River and Pacific Avenue and whatnot. And we were really looking at different alternatives, and I just want to recognize that the committee just understands the importance of the boardwalk to Santa Cruz City and the role that Roaring Camp also brings in attracting tourists to our region. And we really want to seek solutions that support and benefit all of the various stakeholders. And so I found them to be really productive conversations, and a little bit is highlighted in the executive summary, and I'm sure we can talk more about it as we get further information from the report. But want to thank the staff for bringing us together and appreciate the opportunity to engage at that ad hoc committee.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move on to agenda item 29, Director's Report.
Chair, can we go ahead and go to Zoom and see if we got the audio going?
Please.
David, do you want to try again?
Hello? There we are. I wanted to take a moment to thank the RTC for some projects that have made a lot of progress recently. One is the overpass that will be opening soon on Chanticleer. I'm very happy about this. I'm also wanting to thank the RTC for the opening of the latest trail segment. I'm very pleased with it as well. And one other item that was not that is new that I'd like the RTC to think about is the new signals that are timings that are going in on Soquel Drive seem to have very short walk signals. So as a person who has mobility issues may have a lot of difficulty crossing Soquel Drive with these new changes. So please direct staff, if you can, to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we had other speakers. Would you like me to call on them?
Yeah.
Jim Helmer. Mr. Helmer, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. At your May meeting last month, Caltrans staff informed you that they intend to raise the speed limit from 55 to 60 between Pasatiempo and the Ocean Street exit on Highway 17. The exit speeds are 30 and 40 and 35 on those three areas. The decision to raise that speed limit is it's professionally not appropriate. I was the city traffic engineer for 11 years, working with Santa Cruz first responders, CHP, sheriffs, and Chamber of Commerce and local businesses. We should not be raising that speed limit to 60. If you do allow it, and it's in Santa Cruz City's hands right now, they can hold a public hearing to discuss the issue. But if it is approved, it will be good till the year 2039.
Thank you.
Sean? Sean, you're on mute.
Thank you. You know, when anybody hears the word disability, they seem to tune out. Everybody seems to think that they need to have special training and education when that's not how it is. Disability is normal part of the spectrum of of life for us. 26 out of 100 people in America identify with having at least one disability. Who never shows up to tell you that you're doing a lousy job or that things aren't happening fast enough for you? Leaders in the disability community. On July 12th at Cal Beach, we're throwing a large party for people with disability and their friends. It's called Day on the Beach. I'd like to invite the RTC and anyone else who isn't familiar with a disability to come out and see how we are just the same as everyone else and have the same needs and wants.
Thank you.
That was our last speaker.
Thank you. So now 29, Director's Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Montesino. Good evening. I have a short director's report this evening. So we've launched the North Coast Transportation Demand Management Plan work. It's a focused planning effort to improve access, safety, and travel options along the scenic but often congested corridor of Highway 1 between the city of Santa Cruz and the San Mateo County line. To help guide this work, we're inviting the community to take a short online survey and share their experiences. We want to hear what's working, what's not working, and how we can reduce congestion while better serving all who use this important and iconic corridor. The survey link is included in the agenda, and there are flyers here at the entry table in the back of the room that have a QR code to the survey. We encourage widespread participation before the survey closes on July 7th to help shape a smarter, safer mobility along one of our region's most valued routes. Next, I'd like to announce our the Go Bike program launch that we are launching tomorrow. Our Go Santa Cruz County program will officially launch the Go Bike program tomorrow morning. It's a new initiative that we're implementing in partnership with Ecology Action. This program, excuse me, this program is designed to promote a shift from driving to biking by providing financial incentives to make clean transportation more accessible and affordable, and is funded by the Monterey Bay Air Resource District and the RTC. Vouchers to purchase bicycles will range from $300 to $1,200. This includes $300 for traditional bikes, $800 for standard e-bikes, and $1,200 for cargo or adaptive e-bikes. The program offers subsidized annual B-Cycle memberships. It also serves low-income individuals who live or work in Santa Cruz County. To receive a voucher, applicants must complete an online bicycle safety training to ensure users are confident and knowledgeable about safe riding practices. For all other details, including eligibility and how to apply, visit the GoSantaCruz.org/go/bike website. Or just look at this flyer. There's a bunch of them at the beginning or at the front of the room back here in Watsonville Chambers for more information. And lastly, I'm excited to share that on May 21st, Commissioner Keeley and I cut the ribbon commemorating the opening of Coastal Rail Trail Segment 7, Phase 2. We were joined by local leaders and the Bayview Elementary students for a spirited trail walk. This new segment of trail runs from Bay Street to Pacific Avenue along the coastal side of the rail corridor, offering a safe, scenic path for people of all ages and abilities. It connects directly to the Beach Street Bikeway, the boardwalk, and the wharf, and completes the continuous 2.1-mile stretch when linked with the Phase 1 trail. With over 800 daily users already on Phase 1 of the trail, this trail now connects more than 30,000 nearby residents to schools, beaches, jobs, and community destinations. It's a major milestone in building out the coastal rail trail spine and expanding safe, active transportation in our region. And that concludes my director's report.
Thank you. Any commissioners' questions, comments?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Is there something that we forgot, like a award that's pretty big to announce in the director's report, maybe?
Not yet. We may be receiving a grant, but it's not official yet, so I'll save it for when it's official. Stay tuned, though.
Commissioner Cummings.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for their hard work and dedication to, we're going to be talking more obviously about the rail trail tonight, but to that segment and the segments in Santa Cruz, because all I've been hearing are people that are they just really love that section of the rail trail. And the more that we can connect and get people off roads and on safer bike paths, I think the happier people will be with getting out of their cars and trying to bike more in our county.
Thank you. Any comments? I'm going to go out to the public.
Brian Peoples with Trail Now, we actually consider that segment an example of poor public policy by leadership. But what I do want to mention, because it's the director report, the director and the staff went to the city of Capitola and expressed the urgency to meet CTC grant requirements for segment 11. They actually said they had to make a decision at that meeting. Public record disclosures showed that they misrepresented what they knew about the deadlines on the grants. So our question to the director is, what happened to the urgency? What happened to the urgency that we need to move forward with segment 11 and make a decision? There's not a consistency. We're looking for some consistency there. If you're going to the city council of Capitola and pressuring them and saying you have to make a decision right now, that's what they did. But now we know they didn't. So we're looking for more honesty. That's what we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to end the director's report? Seeing none, anybody online?
We do not have anybody online.
So we'll move on. Caltrans report.
Good evening, commissioners. I just want to do a quick audio check, make sure the sound's coming through.
Yes.
Does.
Okay, perfect. Good evening. My name is Kelly McClendon. I'm a senior planner with Caltrans District 5. My first announcement is about an upcoming emergency drainage project that we have on Highway 17. We will close the off-ramp at Sims Road for about 2 weeks, starting next Monday, the June 16th at 8 p.m. And that closure will be in effect for about 2 weeks, expected to reopen by July 1, and that's for emergency drainage work. We will also have an overnight lane closure to the number 2 lane, or the right lane, for some staging for that work. We heard a little bit about, in oral communications, about the speed surveys that we've been doing on Highway 9 and Highway 17. I do have a short update about that. We are planning on working with the city as well as the county of Santa Cruz, and we expect there to be a public hearing at a future city council and county board of supervisors meeting in the near future, likely in the late summer, to bring this item to those forums. And Caltrans will be in attendance at those meetings. And then after those meetings, we're scheduled to finalize those speed limits. And then finally, announcement, we are conducting our annual mowing operation that we do in the early summers to reduce fire risk before the peak fire season. So be aware and on the lookout for crews if you see mowing operations on the side of highways. And as a reminder, we're reminding motorists to move over to the next available lane if it's safe to do so when you see those vehicles and equipment out there on the side of the road. That's all I have, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions? Seeing none, I'm going to go out to the public. Will the public have any questions? Seeing none, anybody online?
We do not have any questions.
All right, so we'll move on. Thank you for that report, and all the hard work that you guys are putting in, over our community. See, Highway 1, 17, Highway 9, so wherever I travel, you guys are there working in your hardest, so thank you for that. So now to the 31, Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project Update. Staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you very much. My name is Riley Gerbrandt of your staff, Associate Transportation Engineer. Myself and parts of the consulting team are here tonight to provide you an update on the Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project, also colloquially referred to as ZEPRT, and provide you with a draft project concept. So we do have slides prepared, so go ahead and get those up. What we plan to do today is to provide you an overview of the project concept, which an executive summary is included as an attachment that was a handout attachment to item number 31 of the agenda, which provides a very detailed summary of the project concept. And to let you know that this morning as well, a virtual online open house was launched, providing a lot more content for the project concept, draft project concept. So that is available online through August 15th, and I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. So the first things we want to do, if you can skip forward to the third slide, is just provide a brief overview of the project, and then we'll provide an overview of the presentation with some summary items, and then get into some details on some of the new content. So for those of you who don't know the depth of the project or aren't as familiar, what it aims to do is to deliver 22 miles of new high-capacity passenger rail service to Santa Cruz County from Pajaro in northern Monterey County to the city of Santa Cruz. It also proposes to complete 12 new additional miles of the Coastal Rail Trail. Those are segments 13 through 20, as well as segment 11, phase 2, the Capitola Trestle segment. And that would complete the Coastal Rail Trail from Davenport through to Pajaro, because the other portions are either already constructed or under development. Next slide. And so on the screen here is our summary slide for our schedule. You've seen it before. A couple updates to this slide are that we adjusted the milestone 3 content to include a discussion of the ongoing conceptual alignment updates that were presented at that time. And we've also moved forward the We Are Here indicator to milestone 4 because we are kicking that off here today. Next slide. So on this slide, I'm not going to read all the detail, don't worry, but it's just a summary for your notes of what the commission has done to date. So some key elements of what the commission actions have been over the life of the project. The last one there, March 2025, was the RTC commission directed staff to pursue intercity passenger rail service on the branch line in order to align our project with the goals of the state rail program, the California State Rail Plan. Next slide. And one more. Yep. So on the screen here is a summary of the engagement that we've done as staff and the commission to date for the project. We've just highlighting some things here. We've had over 1,000 comments received, written comments on the project. We've interfaced with over 5,000 people online. I believe had over 500 people coming to our in-person events. We've got a summary of all the public engagement findings in the executive summary, if you want to look there for some detail. Some quick highlight notes of recent events are we had workshops, both here in Watsonville, just the room across right over there, which was referred to in the commission reports, as well as in the city of Santa Cruz to provide some information that was worked through your commission working groups, and I'll provide a little bit more detail later in the presentation on those. And then secondly, we had an informational community session this past Monday, June 9th, a recording of which is online available for viewing, and that provided information and in-depth information on ridership forecasts and cost estimates. And I want to highlight that we received over 130 questions in that information session from the community, plus some stakeholder or some partner agency work that we did. Some of those questions we're going to look to address tonight in the presentation, and then we're working to put together a FAQ or some sort of way to address the rest of them. Next slide. Okay, so here's where I said we're going to provide just a summary of what's in the executive summary of the project concept. So on your your monitors there and up on the screen, there are a list of items. The bolded items are what we're covering today, so I won't go into detail here on those, but touch on the other things just really briefly. So we had a railroad bridge infrastructure assessment. That was an informational session that was provided in March, looking at the assessment of the existing bridges and what it would take to replace or rehab those, what our strategy was for doing so, what it would cost for doing so, and we'll touch on that later in the presentation tonight as well. We have the fourth on the list, proposed station locations and design concept for facilities and stations. So that's covered in depth in the executive summary, information on the online open house as well. There are 9 stations. We'll get into those, the locations in the presentation tonight. We also have other facilities such as a vehicle maintenance facility, a layover facility, which we'll also talk about tonight. There's initial environmental screening, and that one is not covered on today in much depth, but I do want to highlight a couple things that are in the executive summary. So the initial environmental screening was conducted to identify potential constraints and considerations that may affect the project design of permitting and delivery, and then there's some more detail in the paragraphs in the executive summary. But some synopsis to say that while there are localized constraints, most impacts are likely to be mitigable through design refinements, best practices, and early coordination with regulatory agencies, which we've done as part of this project as well. It identifies priority areas for early study, and some of which we're going to be doing as part of our recently awarded grant to do climate resiliency study on the branch line. We also have the freight rail interface assessment, which talks about how we studied the interface between freight and passenger rail on the rail line and our strategies for doing so, and that we're going to be providing continued coordination to preserve the future interoperability of the rail line. And then lastly is our funding and regulatory strategy. We're, as I mentioned, received direction from your commission to align with the state rail plan, and we're seeking to maximize opportunities for state and federal funding and technical support. And with that, I think I'm turning it over to Mark McLaren from our consultant team to provide, oh, no, not quite yet, Mark. I jumped the gun. So just briefly to summarize what our commissioners, next slide, our commissioners touched on with the commission working groups. On our screen is what came out of the commission working group from the South County focus, where we have the proposed alignment for the rail trail going along West Beach Street and Rodriguez Street, and then going across the river from the end of Rodriguez Street to Pajaro Park, with the rail line being adjusted slightly in Walker Street and positioned on the mountain side of Walker Street to adjust some of the challenges that Chair Montesino was discussing in his report. There are some challenges that we had to work through, but we think this is the best proposal for the situation for downtown Watsonville. And then the next slide is a summary of Santa Cruz and the commission working group outcomes for the city of Santa Cruz. So we considered some Beach Street alignments, which we're continuing forward into future phases of the project. We really appreciate all the work that the commissioners have done, as well as our stakeholders that have worked with us to really work through some of these challenges. Part of the work that went through the workshop outreach and the commission working group was to propose the project to continue to Natural Bridges Drive and the west side, that we are going to carry through an end-of-the-line alternative at the Depot Park in Santa Cruz, but the proposed project would have an end-of-line at Natural Bridges Drive. And with that, I believe I hand it over to No. So there's one more slide. So this was part of what we went out with to the community and the working group with alignment options for Beach Street in Santa Cruz. So there's more information that we do have available, but we wanted to highlight some different views of renderings that the project team put together. A lot of work was put into the considering what it might look like to have passenger rail go down Beach Street in Santa Cruz in front of the boardwalk and to the roundabout. So two different options are presented there. One, an at-grade facility, which is the upper view and then the elevated guideway below. So obviously what is presented there may not be what is ultimately constructed, but these are visions of what could be done. And so that was part of what the commission working group was doing, visioning what could happen in this area. On the screen there are things that were considered and how we might address them. The baseline cost estimate assumes the at-grade alignment. It requires, as we mentioned, additional refinement and coordination with stakeholders going forward. Both alignment options and the associated network infrastructure elements that are still under consideration as a means to address the remaining challenges, such as elevated guideways or other improvements, and their related additional costs are not included in the baseline cost estimate. The baseline cost estimate just includes the base at-grade version. Next slide. And with that, I can hand it over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Riley. My name's Mark McLaren with HDR, and I've had the pleasure of being the project manager for this effort for the last year and a half. And I'd like to cover a couple of areas tonight as outlined in the outline of the project concept, as Riley explained a moment ago. I'm going to start with the subject of rail operations because both the level of service in terms of headways and the hours that a train would operate, as well as the equipment, not only in terms of the trains themselves, but the facility to store and maintain those vehicles is an important part of not only the operating cost, which we'll talk about, but also the capital cost for the construction of the facilities and the elements of that system. In developing this, as again with your direction, we have focused on the idea that this is intercity service that begins with connecting Watsonville and Santa Cruz with the ability to then actually interline and provide connections via the UP main line outside of Pajaro Station to other points throughout the region and throughout the state. The vehicles that we have been discussing and that we've gotten feedback from the community on are multiple units, which are basically a car that has a cab at either end. They're put together with a train that has a cab at either end of it. And so that those two elements create one train set. And to operate the service that we're talking about, the train set that we need would be 5 of those pairs of vehicles to meet that service requirement. The hours of service that we've evaluated and identified is from daily from 6 a.m. To 10 p.m. And in accordance with the state rail plan, it's with the intent and the understanding that that service ultimately would be a 30-minute frequency, so a train every 30 minutes in each direction. But there is the possibility in the earlier initiation of the service to operate that service on an hourly schedule until ridership builds and the demand is there to increase that amount of time. It's also important to understand in the modeling that we've done in looking at the railroad infrastructure and the time that it takes the train to travel, the time that it takes to dwell at a station to allow passengers to get on and off, the travel time from end of the line from Watsonville into Santa Cruz to the Natural Bridges station, which would be the terminus on the western end, would take about 40 to 45 minutes, including the stops at those various locations. Additionally, we've conceptually identified a location where we could accommodate the facilities necessary to store the train, as well as to provide the maintenance of that vehicle or those vehicles when they're not in service. This is a significant part of the project because we need to have a railroad that can operate in its entirety and have all the things that it needs necessary to provide for regular maintenance and for other repairs during the life of the service. But it's also an area where as the other services in this region expand, as a part of other rail programs, there may be the ability through an economy of scale to share some of those services with other agencies. This operating plan then really becomes the basis for the conceptual ridership projections. So just at a high level, what is ridership forecasting?
Mark, did you want to advance the slides?
I'm sorry. Oh. Forgot to tell you, we need to move forward a slide. One more. There we go. Sorry. Rather than look at your screen, I was looking at mine so that I could look at you. So the ridership forecasting is basically a set of data-driven tools that try to understand and interpret what human behavior will be when there's a new service as a part of your transportation network that people have as an option for their travel that they don't currently have today. There's a lot of information that goes into that from a variety of different sources, and it's an important and regular part of transportation planning as we look at how we justify projects, and also a consideration when we look at different funding alternatives and the things that can be provided in terms of ways to advance the project. Next slide, please. Within that approach for this project, we actually relied on two tools. The first is Santa Cruz County's regional travel demand model, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And the second was what is a custom-built or direct ridership model, which was developed by Fair and Peers, who's represented by Chris Brayland here this evening, to take additional information to understand how some of the other things that are going on in the region as well as in the county could in fact benefit ridership to the transit system. I say that because in the regional travel demand model, by guidance from many agencies who evaluate this type of work for benefit of funding, we include projects that have been adopted or plans that have been adopted for the future of your communities. So when there's a new general plan, a new specific plan, a development project that's been permitted, for example, that there is relevance to, that can be put into the model and adopted in that way. But there's a lot of other things that are going on within the community, as well as types of travel, for example, to the boardwalk from tourism, that aren't typically captured in that type of model. And so for that, we have the direct ridership model tool that was developed that Fair and Peers has used many times to take those other elements and pull them into the exercise so that we can understand a range of what the ridership is given what we know and was documented about land use and travel within the region, as well as the things that are online or coming online in the future that have not yet been adopted, as well as some of the other current activity that's not collected through traditional transportation surveys and information that's collected for the region. So this table presents the initial ridership ranges that are broken down to show you the ridership boarding forecast for each of the station locations along the line. The low number effectively represents what would come out of your direct out of your regional travel demand model of the things that are documented that we know that are online or will be online in the forecasted year of 2045, looking out at a time beyond which you would build this project and give it a few years to operate to really gain ridership as it becomes a part of people's daily routines. And the number on the right, the higher number, reflects additional information that we know that's specific to Santa Cruz County, things that are not typically captured and or things that are new plans that have not yet been adopted. So in this case, for example, I'll use Watsonville. There's a specific plan that you've developed for downtown. That information is included in the model. There's your general plan update that is not yet adopted. It is not in the regional travel demand model. However, it was considered in one of the things that was added into in what was done in the direct ridership model. So we've taken those tools and melded them together to provide that comparison. The center column here, the weekend information, is really when we develop these forecasts are on a daily basis, but understanding that there are characteristics that are unique about this area and some of the travel we've identified and kind of ranked on a propensity basis, which of those stations would have higher weekend or lower weekend ridership based on what we understand about travel patterns along the corridor. And this map represents relative representation of the ridership and the attractions. So as you can see from the map, the two most prominent stations on the line are downtown Watsonville and downtown Santa Cruz. Oh, I'm sorry. There it is. And so those are the two stations that have the highest ridership in terms of this evaluation. It's also interesting to note that while the couple of stations that are in between are in fact lower ridership, those 3 or 4 stations cumulatively have about the same amount of ridership as the two major stations, being the Watsonville and Santa Cruz station locations. Next slide, please. We've also done and presented a comparison in response to some questions that came out of the conversation from Monday evening that Riley was referring to, just to show you how this ridership in the future would compare with a couple of other systems that are somewhat similar to what's being proposed here. On the two tables, it is the Zeppert project that's represented on the left side of the column, both in terms of average daily boardings or ridership, and then on the right, how that compares on a per station basis. The second project that's there is the SMART project, which many of you may be familiar with here in Northern California. And the second two projects are actually in San Diego County, being the Coaster and the Sprinter. The Sprinter is, again, very similar in that it's a similarly length corridor that takes folks from another area and connects them in Oceanside to the Coaster service, giving them access to a larger travel margin in terms, or shed in terms of the places that they can go, not only in Southern California, but connections that are statewide as well. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to move on to the cost estimates, and specifically the capital cost. You may recall we had a conversation at one time about the estimated cost of the bridge program that was divided into a couple of key categories. As you go through the estimate that we're going to present to you tonight, you will not see a specific line item that reflects that number as one item, and that's because this cost estimate, as that one was, is broken into several different components, one being the construction and then the other professional services and contingency to come up with the total. So we're going to talk about what's included within the total cost estimate. The bridge costs are incorporated within this, but just not as an individual line item the way that you saw them before. So the first category here is the guideway and track elements. So this is basically the work to recreate or develop the subgrade, build up the grade for putting in place ballast, ties, track, to build the guideway for the system. It's also important to note, while we have not included all the costs for the bike trail improvements, in those areas where we are rebuilding the railroad right-of-way to accommodate both the trail and the railroad. Those improvements within that area are inclusive of the elements of the bike trail that would be in that section. The second area that's included within the estimate is stations. So the platforms, the shelters, the different amenities that are necessary to allow people access to locations to get on and off the system. We have support facilities, which is the layover facility specifically that I spoke about earlier, and the things that it provides in terms of vehicle storage and maintenance, as well as administrative space and other things that need to be done in terms of daily operations of the system. We have signals, systems, and communications, which is not only the communication for the system and its operators itself, it's also the communication systems that inform signals at intersections about arriving trains. It includes the signal equipment, the gates, and the protection that needs to take place at those locations, with the intent of being prepared, as we have discussed previously, about what that means for the opportunities for quiet zones within the corridor. The next item that's included is right-of-way. The right-of-way is primarily associated with the maintenance and storage facility site or the vehicle facility. There is some allocation for some additional areas where we know that we have some narrow constraints that we might need to have additional right-of-way to accommodate that. We also have then the vehicles that are hydrogen powered, as we've discussed with the community. And then finally, we have professional services, which is the design and the construction administration of what it takes to build a system like this. And then finally, contingency. And the contingency, as we have discussed before, is commensurate with the expectations primarily of federal funding partners as to what should be accounted for at this stage of a project, as it has not been through the environmental process yet, and there are a lot of unknowns that will be discussed and resolved as you go through that process, as well as what you learn as you get more detailed information to move into final design. Next slide, please. So this table provides you with the summary of the costs associated with those categories as I've outlined them. This presents a total project cost in 2025 dollars of $4.28 billion. And as I mentioned earlier, that includes within that number the costs associated with the bridge replacements and rehabilitation that we have discussed previously. Next slide. So similarly, we've developed an operating expense estimate. At this level of the project, typically this is an estimate that represents the regular operation and maintenance of the system. It includes for maintenance of way. So that's taking care of the track, the signals, the ballast, the ties, all those other things that are part of the system, as well as the general administration and the labor associated with the operations of the trains, and finally materials and supplies, such as utilities and fuel costs for the system. Next slide, please. We develop an estimate like this, and when a project's at this stage, by looking at an increment of the operation. So in this case, we're looking for each of the train revenue miles that the train operates. And we look at comparisons from similar projects around the country who are required federally to report that cost annually as a part of their projects. So on the table in front of you, you'll see 6 representative agencies from which we've looked at data because of things that are common about either the type of project, the type of operation, the type of equipment that they have in operation today, and what they provide. The blue and green differentiate between the agencies who either contract that service out or the agencies in green who hire their own staff to provide that service and to operate it. You will notice that Capital Metro in Austin is a little bit of an outlier. There is some question as to, because they, like you, have a corridor that the agency owns, and they have 2 contracted operators, one that operates freight, the other that operates passenger service. So there's not a lot of clarity that we're able to ascertain in terms of how they've accounted for the maintenance of that system in the buildup of this cost, but that's the cost that they report for federal purposes as a part of their project. So we took an average of these numbers, which were based at the last reporting period, 2023. They were escalated to account for $20-25 in that evaluation. We also added a 20% contingency on that because there's a couple of elements, particularly the use of hydrogen vehicles, where there's not a lot of historical data to rely on in terms of the specific cost of operating that equipment. And so we've accounted for that, as well as the fact that Santa Cruz Metro has reported and expressed in the past that they have to pay a premium compared to some other agencies to get transit operators to work in Santa Cruz County because of housing costs and other things that affect their decision to take those jobs. So the number that's on the screen right now, referring to the table, we take within the calculation there the number of annual train revenue miles, which is just over 500,000. We multiply it by the average rate, and for the 30-minute frequency of service, we come up with an estimate of $34 million a year before the 20% contingency to account for some of the unknowns or the challenges that we may have in staffing. And obviously, since this is just a simple calculation at this point in time, given the average experience of other agencies, if we were only operating a 60-minute service, it would be half the cost compared to the 30-minute service in the plan. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd like to turn this back to Riley to continue with next steps.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, commissioners, again. So next steps in brief for the project team are to complete the project concept report. As I mentioned, the draft project concept is out. Over the summer, we're going to continue with engagement with the community and with stakeholders to receive their input, incorporate any important elements that come out of that process into the draft project concept report, which we will then bring back. And we anticipate this fall to have the final project concept report for your consideration after an August 7th public hearing, an opportunity then to incorporate anything that we need to for the final report. After that, we will continue to identify and pursue the remaining funding that is for the to complete the environmental analysis, and that currently is about 14 to 16 million. And then we will work to develop a project funding and implementation strategy, and that is basically looking at what incremental steps we have to, or we can do, in order to better position this project to advance through the environmental process and environmental design, working with partners, working with Caltrans, working through different various systems. And then lastly, highlight again that some of the ongoing work related specifically to kind of our environmental analysis is the Zeppert Corridor Climate Resiliency Study that the staff are about to kick off. Next slide. And then I mentioned earlier some of our upcoming engagement opportunities. We have our virtual online open house I mentioned, which is open through August 15th for comment. We have going to change a little bit our strategy based on feedback we heard from milestones 1 through 3. Instead of large workshops or open houses, we're going to have office hours where the community can come into our offices in Santa Cruz, or we're going to come back here to Watsonville, hold open house or office hours for people to come talk with us in a more intimate, small scale setting. We're going to set some times for people to book with us, both in the morning and the evening, maybe through the day, both virtually and in person, to provide those contact points for the community and those who are interested. We're also going to look for some pop-up community events, such as the Watsonville Farmers Markets, the Midtown Fridays, is it? Then also promote other engagement opportunities. And then I mentioned the public hearing and then the final report coming in the fall. And I believe that wraps us up. Thank you for hanging in there. And myself and my team, Mark McLaren, our project manager from HDR, as well as Chris Brayland from Fair and Pierce, and Chris O'Gara from HDR, our experts in some of the technical aspects, are here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. So now commissioner questions. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. So just a couple of questions around ridership. Mr. McLaren, you had a chart up there that talked about ridership comparisons, and it listed all of the station locations. In that, are we, for those numbers, are we accounting for embarkments or disembarkments at those stations, or one and not the other?
All right, so Chris Brayland from Fair and Pierce is here for that answer.
Chris.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. I can handle that question. Those are what we term as boardings. So each one of the figures there represents a boarding. There is a corresponding deboarding or a lighting, as we call it sometimes, at a downstream station.
And with those ridership estimates, is there any way that we formulate into this or calculate for how long those boardings might ride on the train? Might they ride 1 or 2 stations, or the whole ball of wax, or how do we, and what do we account for those?
Yeah, so in short, the travel patterns for when people get on and off the train are based on the Santa Cruz RTC ridership model, which looks at what are the overall patterns that people make trips for if they're going to work or if they're going to shopping or whatever the case may be. There's an underlying pattern of someone's trying to go from, say, Watsonville to Capitola, for example. That trip makes a choice to ride the train in the model, and it's captured so we can track its boarding and alighting position.
Okay. And maybe you can address this too, but Mr. McLaren was talking about perhaps the idea of starting with hourly service, and then as demand reaches the need, we would then adjust to something like half-hour, 30-minute intervals in service on that. Do you have based on your ridership projections, do you have some idea about how far into that future, once we hit go, how far down the road is it until we anticipate we might reach that kind of ridership to have to start 30-minute intervals? Or do we have an estimate on that?
I can't speak specifically to that, but what I can say is that ridership is what we say in the business elastic to frequency. In other words, that the more frequency you provide, the more riders you get. And it's what we would term the more frequency gets you more riders than just adding the frequency would alone. So it's a compounding effect. So a lot of agencies make that decision looking at what the initial ridership is, but it's ultimately a financial decision towards how quickly you want to ramp up. So there's no right or wrong answer in terms of that ramp up period. It's a fairly complex decision.
Okay. And then also, too, on our ridership comparisons, where you took a look at our system, the ZPERT, if you will, here. It's like I want to buy a vowel in there somewhere, right? Then you have the Smart, the Coaster, and the Sprinter. The Coaster and the Sprinter are both down in the larger San Diego metropolitan area, right? One performs better in terms of ridership. One didn't perform quite as well as our projection. And I'm just curious how that comports. When we look at population comparisons, San Diego metro area, obviously a much larger population area. And you look at our population area where we think that we're going to perhaps perform better in some areas or perform better than like the Smart train, which also I think has a larger population area. How do we get to that ambitious conclusion that we're going to outperform those systems?
So part of what's maybe a little bit hidden, and we have there's materials presented a little bit earlier on this, is the ridership per capita. So the ridership per capita is a bit higher for the Santa Cruz branch line that we were modeling than two of those systems, the Smart and the Coaster, but not necessarily the Sprinter service. And one of the pieces that we had taken into consideration in the modeling are some of the unique tourist and recreation destinations that are serviced by this rail that are not as prominent, if you will, on the other systems, given their distance from the coast or the fact that they're a little bit more oriented towards sort of more commuter or other types of uses. So that part does play a fairly significant role, as Mark noted, the base ridership of around 3,500 boardings per day versus the higher end that had all of those what we call special generators factored in is part of what's picking up that difference. And just briefly, as we've been working on transit systems around the country, today the ridership component that sort of rebounded the fastest and in fact is above pre-COVID conditions is related to recreational and entertainment travel patterns. And in some systems, not quite a few, in fact, the weekend ridership is above pre-COVID, and sometimes Saturday can be the peak service day. So it's those conditions that are more unique here in Santa Cruz County than what we see in San Diego or Marin County.
Okay, and just a couple more, if my fellow commissioners will indulge me here. Again, talking about ridership here. Now, as I understand it, there's a seating capacity on these train sets of 234, and is that for both trains that are coupled together in that train set that we're talking about, or is it per train?
It sounds like it's for the set.
So it's for the set. So if my math is right here, in order to reach some of those ambitious ridership numbers here, just at 3,500, we're going to have to fill every seat on that train 15 times a day to reach that. And, or if we're going to reach that 6,000, we're going to have to fill that 234-seat train 25 times a day. Is that a realistic, my question behind that is that really a realistic expectation? And it's not meant to be a gotcha. I'm asking because I want to be educated on this.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and the ridership levels for this type of rail system are not unusual for comparable systems that we see in the country. So using often multiple unit trains like this is being offered, that doesn't mean that every seat's always going to be full at all times. There are certain trains that will be busier than others. So I can just nominally state that the ridership projections that we have are within the range of similar systems around the country.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I just have one last question here. As we looked at that slide that had the potential Beach Street alignments on that, and Riley, I don't know if you want to take that or not, I was a little confused. The one that showed it at surface level, is that a proposal to reduce Beach Street down to one lane in that?
Has to be green.
We've crashed the system, Riley.
Yeah. So the way you're referring to Beach Street, Santa Cruz.
Yes.
And the
thank
at-grade
you.
version, it would reduce Beach Street from the roundabout to Cliff Street to one lane.
Okay.
There's options for what could be considered from Cliff Street to 3rd Street or 3rd Avenue. We can keep 2 lanes of traffic through there.
And then, again, I realize we're just talking supposals here, but just to kind of get my head around this. In the alternative that you had there with the raised platform, and would the proposal be to keep that raised platform along that very same distance between Cliff Street and the roundabout?
So the elevated guideway, we call it, would be from the San Lorenzo River or coming underneath the Flume Ride and then shifting north onto an elevated guideway to Cliff Street. And that would be at an elevation of around 15 and a half feet between the ground surface and the under the part of the superstructure. Then we have to come down before we hit the roundabout in order to get through the roundabout and underneath the existing bridge, the West Street Bridge or West Cliff Bridge.
Almost sounds like it could be one of those rides on the boardwalk then. I'm just curious what my Coastal Commission friend would think of that raised platform, but that's a question for another day. Thank you both. And let me just thank you all for the presentation. I know that there's been a lot of hard work around this. Regardless of where you stand on this, there's been a lot of quality work that has gone into this analysis. I appreciate you bearing with me with my questions just to kind of help us get our head around it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Yes.
Hernandez?
So, about a year and a half ago, we had that presentation with TIGM. And I was wondering, was there a discussion between hydrogen and electric? And has any providers used electric? My only concern is that, if hydrogen fueling was also kind of put in the formula, because it's difficult, I've been on Honda Insight platforms, and they hate, having to find Google where their hydrogen filling station's at. And electric's so easy, it's.
So the short answer, yes, we considered it. Mark, did you want to share anything more?
Well, I was going to say.
Turn on the mic.
I was on a second. Yeah, there we go. All right. Early in this conversation, as it got started, we had a lot of conversation in the community about what power sources would be. You will recall that was actually coming off the winter storms of 23, through which there was a lot of wind damage, tree falls, things along the corridor. And one of the concerns that we did hear was the sustainability of overhead catenary running the length of the system. As it relates here, battery power is a challenge here. given some of the grades and the other things that occur and the ability to have a train run the length of the line with enough recharging to have a full service day. And we focused and got a lot of feedback on hydrogen because of the fact that it is an emerging technology that actually the state of California has been encouraging and has been a part of in the work that's being done in San Bernardino to bring hydrogen powered rail equipment to California and put it into service. From a safety perspective, it has been going through all of the required safety certifications to be allowed to operate in the corridor, and it's FRA compliant. And by that I mean, and this is specific to the multiple units, when we had the earlier conversations and we were asked questions about the TIGM vehicles and the demonstration of the work that had been done here previously, with that interest, one of the challenges with that equipment is it does not comply with the certification requirements of the CPUC for safe operation in a corridor that's also being used for other purposes. If this were a dedicated travel way where there were no intersections and things to be crossed, that might be a possibility. But the state of California has very stringent what we call crashworthiness requirements as it relates to rail vehicles to not only protect the rail passengers, but also to protect other people in the community as it relates to the potential for incidents. And that vehicle currently does not comply. So in looking at the service and, again, the interest of having interoperability, FRA compliance was important in the conversation to ensure eligibility for the intercity rail program, which was one of the directions that you've provided to us as a commission.
So right now, in order to create sustainable rail, it'd have to be hydrogen. That's the only solution at this point?
It's not the only solution, but it is certainly a solution that's been advancing in the state because of what it provides in terms of zero emissions. And based on how that equipment operates and how it's been developed, it's been more frequent in a couple of European countries, but longer term, it's believed that it will have a lower cost of operation and maintenance because of reduced wear and tear on the type of equipment that it is from a motive standpoint.
And the fueling question?
Well, that gets back to the issue of not having a lot of historical information. As this project moves forward, this is a project that the timeline for implementation will be a number of years. And we are understanding and hopeful that fueling for hydrogen will continue to advance on a parallel track, no pun intended, so that we have the ability to more effectively fuel. But as you move forward through this conversation, clearly the type of fuel that's being used will be a part of your environmental consideration as well as you look at alternatives to ensure that this is the most prudent path forward.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And a question about ridership too. You know, I've never heard the term elasticity, but I knew that that was a concept, right? That the more ridership there is, the more people are going to get on it. Are we able to create a sort of hybrid model that has that elasticity, at least in the AM hours and PM hours when the highway is full, like 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., to have that 30-minute run for those 2 hours, 4 hours per day, and then have the 1 hour after that? Would that be, because you want it to be successful. So if you have that elasticity during the peak hours and then settle it down during the rest of the day. Is that a possibility?
Would you like to answer that, Chris? Or? Yeah. No, that's certainly a possibility. And to Mr. Braylon's point earlier, that's, you know, a political and financial decision for all of you to make as you move forward, because as ridership starts to build on a system and we see how it works at different times of the day, that will help inform what the travel patterns are. But also important to the point that was made, you have a lot of tourism travel that comes in and out of this county. That is an area where you have seen a lot of growth in recent years. And to Chris's point, a lot of transit agencies that are currently reporting that they are back to COVID or higher than pre-COVID levels of transit ridership, that ridership doesn't reflect what it looked like 10 years ago. And these travel models were built to look at what we call a home-based work trip, which is that time of the day that you're talking about, the morning, the evening, the times of the day that you would see the heaviest traffic. But as you all know from driving out here, you've got heavy traffic at 2:30 in the afternoon, right? And that's because people aren't doing that traditional work trip 5 days a week. But what communities have found is when people are making a travel choice for something that's not work-specific, there's now a higher propensity in places where it's available for them to use transit than there was prior to COVID.
Well, thank you for all your guys' work on this.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners?
I have a few questions. Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, staff, and thank you, HDR, for this report. I mean, obviously, this is just the executive summary and the presentation I think that we've had the opportunity to see as a commission, but it certainly provides some of the core numbers and I think really starts to paint a clear picture of what's before us with this project. A couple bits of feedback. First of all, like my colleague, Mr. Clark over there, I was a little bit perplexed by the interchangeable use of riders versus boardings. I mean, it seems like you've clarified a couple times that we're really talking about boardings every time some kind of ridership figure is mentioned, and I think we absolutely need to call those boardings so that riders are not confused with like unique users that might actually represent 2 trips likely in a day or whatever. I would also, I mean, I hear what you're saying about us being a tourist community and that leading to increased ridership, but still the fact that we're projecting our lowest possible ridership at 3,500 higher than SMART. I mean, SMART, I think, is somewhere around 2,700, 2,900 boardings a day. Right now, it's a system that has a population general area in both Sonoma and Marin counties. It's 2.7 times the total population of Santa Cruz County. So to be projecting an initial ridership that's greater than SMART seems pretty darn unrealistic to me, even if tourists are getting on the train. I also have a question about the feasibility analysis that might be included in the final report. We looked a little bit at operating expense per train revenue mile. I mean, that was sort of to get to an operating cost. But my understanding is that if we're going to go for grants, particularly with the federal government, that the FTA looks at a cost per passenger mile. Is that accurate, or what's the standard for comparing different systems?
So in the conversation as it relates to ridership and specifically what federal funding partners look at, that is an ongoing and evolving conversation as it relates to changes in guidance as well as the administration is focused. There were a couple of questions that came up Monday evening that we've had a discussion about some different ways that we can provide some comparisons on the cost per rider, other measures that we can report back to you as a part of the evaluation. The Federal Transit Administration has a very complex listing of criteria and data that has to be reported off of the ridership modeling as a part of a grant application. It's not just that cost per passenger mile. It's many other things, and they are weighted in different ways to come up with a recommendation as to whether or not the project gets funded. And so it's not just that number that's taken alone. There are projects that may be lower than others, but still score higher overall because of other benefits that they're providing back to the community. And those are benefits that not only have to do with land use and development, they have to do with greenhouse gas, environmental consequences, as well as how many new transit riders are being brought to the transit system because of that investment.
All right, well, I will just say that I think it'd be helpful to look at as many of those metrics as possible in the final report so that we have a sense of how competitive this project will be when going for federal funding, which we would obviously need to do. And I mean, even if cost per passenger mile is just one of several, it seems like that's a pretty important one to look at. The next question, I think this is for our executive director. What do you see as the minimum amount of the capital costs that we would need to be able to cover locally and I'm thinking about this as far as, ultimately calculating, well, how big of a sales tax would we need? How much of that $4.28 billion number that was put out there, should we be planning to say, like, yeah, we need to be able to cover at least what percentage?
Thank you, Commissioner Koenig. Generally speaking, for just the capital component, not counting the support, I would advise the absolute minimum grant match that we plan for be 20%, if not higher, because obviously the higher the local match, the more competitive the program is for outside funding because it shows that commitment. In terms of the support cost, which I think you're going to ask about next, is there's less grants for pre-construction components, and pre-construction meaning environmental, final design, right-of-way. Those components tend to be locally funded, the majority of those components locally funded. There are some competitive grants out there, but they're few and far between. And so, it's uncertain right now, but we could potentially get some federal or state funds for the pre-construction, but it changes, like the funding landscape changes with every federal administration, it changes with the state, priorities and policies over time. And so what staff can do is maybe consider a snapshot in time of today's landscape, subject to change based on future priority changes. So,
Okay, so when you're talking about support costs, when in the, abbreviated line item cost estimate for this that we saw, would that be the professional services line item, more or less, or would it be some subset of that?
yes, and maybe the team can answer where right-of-way is included. One of the things to consider is, this was something that I've learned about recently, is about the maintenance and layover facility that, obviously we own the corridor, but we don't have land in South County that RTC owns. So we would have to purchase, a decent parcel to build that facility. And so was that included in the professional services or a different line item? Thanks, Mark.
The cost of the land itself is included there is a line item for right-of-way. The activities that you're referring to in terms of the preparatory work to advance the project right now from a technical side is included within the professional services. So identifying that right-of-way, appraising it, all of those activities would be a professional service. The cost of the land itself would fall under that other line item. It's also worth noting, too, as we talk through this, and as Riley mentioned, as we work on a strategy over the summer for moving this project forward, there are two different primary funding sources through which this project could pursue funds, one being the Federal Transit Administration's process, the other being the Federal Railroad Administration's process. And one of the discussions earlier on about kind of the emphasis of this project was to align it with where it had the best opportunities for funding at the highest levels. And as the administrations stand right now, that is through the Federal Railroads program as a part of the Intercity Rail program. Now, admittedly, as Sarah said, with each administration there's changes. Those changes affect the rules and how that those funds are going to be applied. But historically, the Federal Railroad program, which is a newer program, has provided funding to as much as that 80% level that the director was referring to. On the Federal Transit Administration side, while the law says they can fund to that amount, historically they have rarely gone above 50%. So that was a part of the conversation that we had as well in terms of identifying this as intercity service.
Okay. But, kind of getting back to just trying to figure out what we would be on the hook for locally, for that $684 million in professional services, should we be looking at or planning to basically be able to cover all of that cost or 20% of it?
It's uncertain at this time, and that is part of the work that staff plans to do over the summer, is to put together a bit more detailed financial plan for this project.
Okay. I think this is a question for our legal counsel, Mr. Mattis. Does the RTC have the ability to leverage taxes other than sales taxes? I mean, could we pass a property tax, for example? I mean, assuming that it was approved by voters, of course.
No, there's no specific authority under the state statutes for transportation authorities to levy anything other than a sales tax and in some instances a vehicle registration fee.
Okay. So if we're really just talking about sales tax, and it sounds like 20% of 4.28 billion is 850 million, sort of it sounds like at the low end, if we're responsible for all of those professional services, the additional 684 million, and then just 20% of what's left over, we're on the hook for 1.4 billion. So then if you back that out, I mean, of course, we've got to consider bonding costs. We've seen how significant those can be in looking at trying to finance the portions of the rail trail that are currently underway. And if you assume 5% interest rate over a 30-year payback period, 1.25% debt coverage ratio, my friend ChatGPT here tells me that basically we'd need to be able to, so on the low end, come up with $70 million per year just for the capital costs. And then, of course, we need at least $34 million for operating. So that's $104 million per year that we'd need to generate in sales tax revenue. Keep in mind, Measure D currently generates a half-cent sales tax, $27 million per year. And then if on the high end, we'd need, potentially as much as $148 million per year if we're on the hook for that $1.4 billion amount. So, I mean, what this means for people's pocketbooks is really we're talking about either 2% sales tax increase all the way up to a 2.75% sales tax increase. City of Santa Cruz right now is at 9.75%. So, on the low end, we're now going up to 11.75, possibly as high as 12.5%. That would absolutely make us the highest sales tax in California. The highest right now is 11.25% in Palmdale and Lancaster. So it's just a pretty crushing amount. I mean, we were just talking at the Board of Supervisors trying to fill our own budget shortfalls, and we heard suggestions from our now former Health Services Agency director saying, hey, maybe we should consider a behavioral health sales tax in order to cover some of these shortfalls. I mean, we would just, the pressure on our local sales tax capacity, I mean, this would take all the oxygen out of the room for funding any other kind of service through sales tax pretty much ever again. So, yeah, that's pretty daunting. Then, of course, there's just funding the next phases of the study. So my last question for now is just where, to our executive director, where could we potentially get money just to fund the next phases of this study, and kind of what level of commitment are we talking about, if we want to keep moving forward?
Sure. As Riley mentioned in his presentation, we do not have full funding for environmental, and we are looking at potential grant opportunities, one being the Federal Railroad Administration Corridor ID program, which is likely to be competitive, so it's not a done deal that we're going to just get, potentially up to 80% of the environmental funded. So we're definitely funding that, or pursuing that. It's not going to be available for a couple of years. We're also still pursuing California State Rail Assistance funding, and that is a very uncertain funding source, but we're trying to keep tabs on it to try to get in line and potentially get a few million there. We've been pursuing that funding since the beginning of the concept development. And then we have the rail pot of Measure D, which in the expenditure plan allows for analysis of options, which does include environmental analysis. The challenge with that pot is that 8% of the measure is the sole funding source really for infrastructure preservation along the line. And so it's risky if you start really taking big chunks of it to invest in a, of the magnitude that would be needed. And then another consideration for that pot of funding is that we have not gotten reimbursed by FEMA for the 2017 or 2023 storms. And so we're looking at, if we don't get reimbursed, we're going to have to pay back or, replenish those funds out of the Measure D rail category. So we have, pretty limited funds locally secured right now. But there are some potential opportunities out there. The other option is the discretionary funds that the RTC gets on every 2 years, and that's item 32 on the agenda, which we'll hear from later, is that, the RTC gets, cycles of funding from the state when we consolidate it all together, and then we have a call for projects when all of our member agencies and apply for this funding, and that's also a potential source that the commission could commit funds toward this project to keep it moving forward.
Right. And of course, if we did that, then we're taking funds away from all of our local agency projects, our road projects, our road safety projects, et cetera, in order to keep advancing this report. In my mind, the primary goal with this entire study process was to determine whether or not this project is feasible. I think we have our answer. It's not. Simply from a financial standpoint. Unless any of my colleagues here think that they'd be willing to endorse a 2% sales tax increase.
Hearing none.
But I'll end my comments there and look forward to hearing from the public.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Cummings? Or Commissioner Martinez?
Okay, sure. All right, well, thank you to the staff and to HDR for the information. It was really informative, and I'm still, as a new commissioner, getting up to speed on the project and just trying to understand all of the options before us. I know Commissioner Koenig was asking about that next phase. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. We still have the environmental analysis, and did you say that's about 15 million?
Correct. I believe it's 15 to 60 million, right, Riley?
Estimated 14 to 16 million that we have need for.
And that could change the overall cost of the project.
Yeah, when Mark was elaborating on some of the risks that we've identified and that contingency amount that he referred to, the contingency amount reflects where we're at currently. As we go through the environmental process, some of those risks we get to investigate further. We get to know them better, retire some, maybe some of them we realize, so then we can refine the cost estimate as well as the contingencies.
Thanks. So that was my next question. So the contingency at about 20%, I think it was 20%?
20% for the capital operations.
Got it.
The operations and maintenance. Capital, I think, it was closer to 40. I think it was like 42 or so.
Oh, got it. Okay.
For the current stage.
And that's something that would be standard at this phase in the project and would be refined once the environmental analysis is complete?
That is correct.
And if we were to be able to fund 15 million for the environmental analysis, how long does that take?
For something of this size, at least 3 years, I would say.
And, with the type of numbers that we're talking about, it's clear if this project were to move forward, it's a long-term project. You can't just build it and the entire thing's complete. So given that, and given that we've given directive to make this project as competitive for federal funds as possible, where would you start the project? Where could you imagine the first segment to be operable.
Right, so you're getting into some of what we talked about or referenced with the implementation strategy. I think you're referring to probably phasing the project. So if we were to phase the project, since we have Pajaro at the southern end, and that's a connection to the UP, we would start from there and work north. So part of the implementation strategy could look at, specifically with the commission's direction, like what would a phasing look like working from south to north?
And so if we were to imagine, starting a project to pilot, we'd be talking about starting in the Pajaro region and seeing what ridership would look like and sort of building from there.
Likely. That would be our recommendation at this point, because with that, we have the intercity connection at Pajaro. The commission could direct otherwise. We could look at other phasing options. But for our project team, that's what we propose.
And if we were to move the phasing to, say, North County, where we're talking about a lot of the tourism and stuff like that, what would that do to the competitiveness of our project for some of those federal or state grants, federal grants?
So if that's something that we do look at, if we look at phasing from, say, Santa Cruz South or some other segment, we would need to look at holistically, how does that package get implemented as a whole ultimately? Because any project that would look for intercity rail funds, for instance, would have to show that you're going to have that intermodal connection. So we would have to look at it as a strategy over a period of time that would build out all the way.
Okay, so it sounds like it would be probably less competitive, or we'd really have to be able to show that we've got a full plan and project to make it competitive if we were starting in North.
Right. If in any phasing strategy, you would look at independent utility. Mark mentioned that statement. So you look at projects that you could come online that have, independent of the rest of the system, have their own utility, cost benefit analysis and benefits there. So ultimately, if you're looking at how can we make this the most effective and attractive, you look at what are the things that we can do in the system that have the most bang for your buck, and you start there.
Got it. Thank you.
Anything you want to add on that, Mark? Okay.
And then just another question, probably for the consultants. In the prior conversation, we were talking about the bridges. One of the commissioners was sort of asking, is this the Cadillac Bridge plan? And if so, could we get the Camry Bridge plan? And those weren't my comments, that came from a fellow commissioner, but I'm kind of wondering with regards to this project, is this all the bells and whistles, or is this kind of the standard level project to get us towards our goals?
This is a standard level project, and specifically to the question about the bridges were designed to freight standards because this is a shared use corridor with the intent of having freight service. There was some contingency that was allowed within that for a couple of the bridges which you have, which are iconic, that are things that are landmarks that will be important to do something that the community will probably want that's a little more unique in design. But all in all, the construction as it was proposed was standard for a project like this without being gold-plated.
Thank you.
I'm just happy to hear that we didn't buy the Ford Pinto project. So.
Yeah, we wanted to run.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for the presentation, and I know that we aren't to a final report yet, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the public on what we have here, and I think that's coming up the next couple of months, and also really interested in looking at the numbers. I think that the price tag, every single person up here and in the room or in this county can see that price tag and, feel a knot in their stomach. So I think that it's important for us as commissioners to really look at the numbers, look at the options, look at the scenarios that have been presented, and have some discussions about that. So thank you for the information today.
Thank you, Commissioner Cummings.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for the presentation. I'm feeling a little bit more of an optimist here because, I think that over the course of time that we've been trying to implement the rail trail, this commission and the commission staff have been really good at securing funding, even when people think that it can't be done and it's going to cost us tons of money. This commission and the staff have been consistently really good at securing the federal and state dollars to help keep us moving forward. So I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic around continuing forward with this. But I do think that, there are a number of points that have been brought up around needing, where are the opportunities for savings? And so I'm just wondering, if there are any other options that we can consider. I mean, this is going after the, federal funds and trying to have the best project that's going to be able to attract that funding. But I'm wondering, even under those conditions, are there areas for, say, for example, the stations? Like, we see Sacramento, we look at San Jose and their light rail. Those stations are much less complex. They're more or less the platforms people get on and off. And so I'm just wondering if there are opportunities for savings here within this project that we can have another option come forward, or if we weren't going to go, let's say we're not going to go after those federal funds, are there other types of rail options that we could consider that would allow us to save funding on the costs?
Mark, I'm going to pitch this to you, and I can fill in some gaps if I feel like there's something to add.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, part of the intent of implementation strategy, as Riley is describing, is to ensure that what's been defined as the project is maximizing where there are opportunities for funding to bring the most back in terms of federal and state investment into this corridor as it moves forward. As is required with a lot of those partners, as a project like this continues to advance, there will be a value engineering conversation at a point to determine if there are things that could be done more efficiently or more effectively. That's what has been envisioned. And then similarly to the comment about stations, what we have proposed in terms of stations right now are nothing elaborate. It's providing shelter and it's providing the basic amenities that a passenger needs to have to get on and off the train. Admittedly, an intercity service with a train of this length and with people waiting for a longer period than they might on waiting for a light rail service that's more frequent, need a little bit more in terms of space, as well as the platform has to be raised to specifically interface with the vehicle where it's put into place there. There are always opportunities as we continue to look at how we can refine the cost. But given what we know of the corridor today, the things that have been identified in the conversation about the bridge program, understanding the state of the right-of-way, and integrating both the railroad and the trail into long segments of this corridor, we believe that what's being put forward is a reasonable cost as it relates to a project that has not been over-designed.
And I'll add one thing to consider. This is a big number, right? And one thing that our project team was discussing as we prepared for today is some of the context around the number and the costs. And when you look at kind of what came before this concept, we looked at this rail line, looking at it kind of like as a rehabilitation or refurbishing of the existing rail line. And as we work through the kind of risks and some of the analysis that we've done as part of this team, is we're really looking at, starting scratch with a lot of the rail infrastructure on the corridor. Meaning, we looked previously, could we reuse some of the ballast, some of the, some of that type of material, and due to some of the alignment considerations that we had to bring forward in terms of the realigning portions of the rail, like particularly areas where there's not enough space to fit both a trail and a rail in the same with the current alignment, we have to shift over the rail. We're really looking at taking down the existing tracks, ties, ballast, subgrade, and then starting from there and building up again. So it's not just rehabilitating the existing line; it's kind of rebuilding a new line. The only thing we have going for us compared to, like, say, a different line that would be building from scratch is we do have the corridor in place and the land for the vast majority of the project we're keeping within the existing right-of-way.
So a follow-up to something that was mentioned earlier around, and thank you for that, around value engineering. I was wondering, is there also plans for any kind of external peer review? Because I know that for some of the other road projects, you know, they'll have peer review and value engineering. So I'm wondering if there's going to be any kind of external peer review of this study when it's released.
Yeah, value engineering is a process that brings peers from other agencies at different levels and other projects to come in and share experiences, best practices, and lessons learned to ensure that what's being constructed is being done, as I said, in the most cost-effective and efficient manner as possible. And that is a process that a project like this will go through probably more than once as it progresses to the point of before you would begin construction.
On a value engineering process, when you look at other type projects, what type of percentage do you see change when you do a value engineering approach? Are we talking, 3 to 5%?
There's not really a set average, I would say, in terms of a goal of what's being achieved. And I can personally tell you that I've worked on projects where value engineering has actually raised the cost of a project. In times because in the zeal to cut costs on a project, an owner has removed something that is either going to make it difficult to the commissioner's point, align with what funding goals are from funding partners, or to meet specific requirements as required for safety of operation of the system. So the real intent of value engineering is to make sure that the right elements are included within the project to get it funded, to have it operate safely, but being done in the most cost-effective way possible.
Thank you.
So just following up on some of the ridership comments that came up, because one of the things we noticed in the projections was that it didn't include the future growth from the Watsonville General Plan or from the Santa Cruz Downtown Expansion Plan. And so I'm just wondering, one, why those projections weren't incorporated, and if there's an opportunity to incorporate those projections, just given that we're going to see, population growth as these plans, these plans have been adopted, and as they're executed, we're going to see, major growth in populations. Especially, I can speak to Santa Cruz with the downtown expansion plan. Thousands of units going in, and then I guess a follow up to that too is also, were the different regional housing elements incorporated? Because again, in each of those elements, there's thousands of units of housing that are being proposed, and I think that if we're taking into account that future growth, that also can increase the demand that we'll likely see on these lines. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to the Santa Cruz Downtown Expansion Plan, the Watsonville General Plan, and then potentially to the housing elements that we've all been adopting.
So if those housing elements have been adopted, they are items that are included typically within the regional travel demand model that we spoke about, the Santa Cruz County model. Specifically to Watsonville, your general plan update that's in process, which I believe Farron Pierce is a part of helping you with the travel demand associated with that element. There's information that they had as a part of that process that's included in the add-on or the direct ridership modeling work that was done. Your general plan 2050 update as it stands right now is not fully included within that regional model, and it can't be because it hasn't been adopted yet. In the case of Santa Cruz, the downtown expansion plan, which was just recently adopted by council, will be included in an update that we will be doing in the coming weeks as we're going into the public conversation about this project. Unfortunately, that information in terms of the adoption of that plan wasn't received in time for us to be able to incorporate it into the data as it was presented this evening.
Thank you. And then last question. There's a number of stops that, I think many people in the community could see as being, high-use stops that weren't included. For example, Bay in California, that is a stop. That's a site where a lot of students, going up Bay Street, it's like, a couple blocks from the Bay and Mission bus stops, which are highly utilized. That wasn't included as a stop because I think, on the weekends, for example, Beach Street totally makes sense. But during the weekdays, in terms of students who are going to be trying to get to UCSC, like that Bay in California stop makes way more sense than going all the way to Natural Bridges, just because of the fact that, Natural Bridges, I think there's one line, the 20, that may, and actually, I don't think it even goes all the way down to the end of Natural Bridges, versus Bay in California, which would be a high-use stop. And so I'm just wondering, that's one. And then, with Capitola, there's, been a proposal for building more housing right near the shopping mall. And the fact that there's a mall there that's limping, but it's still there. But, having a stop on 41st Ave. And so I'm just wondering why those two stops weren't considered, because that could, that has the potential to increase ridership, which could help, justify the cost and help bring down those costs in terms of number of riders.
So going back to the word of the day, elasticity. There are a number of different options that we could continue to test and look at, and we'll work through with staff on some of those in terms of providing some feedback and possibly looking at a few of them further. When we started this analysis, we started with a propensity analysis, which was looking at existing data just in the regional travel demand model, in looking at new information that had been provided to us about land use, as well as understanding how the Santa Cruz metro system is being used today. And again, because we are trying to keep the travel time at a competitive range, so that if you had the choice between driving between Watsonville and Santa Cruz or taking the train would be competitive to you. Each time we add a station to the system, it adds at least 2 minutes to that travel time between the two communities. So we were trying to hit a spot where we felt that it was competitive while addressing the key markets along the corridor for riders on and off the system, understanding that in some locations, while there's an option that might have been closer for some people, the location that we believed we were choosing was one that would serve more people or more riders at a specific time. I understand that in the two cases you referenced specifically, those stations were fairly close together. But at the same time, one of the things that we can look at and evaluate is what the trade-offs are, and it may be that one of those stations makes more sense than the other, but adding all of them in then becomes disruptive to the estimates in terms of overall ridership, because as we increase the travel time on the corridor, the evidence that we know is then that ridership goes down.
One last question. Sure. So just as we're having this conversation, I'm just thinking about in terms of the phasing of the project, if this were to move forward, would it likely be that the rail would get laid first and then we'd put in stations along the way, or would we kind of rail station at the same time each segment? Because I'm just thinking there may be an opportunity to get if the rail's laid first, getting folks moving and taking the train, and as we build stations out, right? So it's we don't need every single station built in order for this thing to start moving. There could be opportunities to get the rail line down, build in the stations over time, seek fund, and as we seek more funding, we can get this thing moving, along rather than expecting to do everything all at once. And so I'm just wondering, what kind of opportunities there are there, and that being used as a cost-saving mechanism.
As we talk about implementation and the idea of phasing, that's certainly a part of the consideration that we can make. Again, as we discussed earlier, as I mentioned and Riley brought up as well, it's important that any project that we look at as a phase is something that has independent utility to make it eligible for the types of funding that we'd be looking to bring to the project. And again, that's a consideration, the type of input we'd like to hear from the community about what that implementation might look like in their minds in terms of doing things incrementally.
Great, thank you. That ends my comments.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have a number of questions. I think they're pretty basic. But is my understanding that you could only move 134 passengers from point A to beginning of the line to the end of the line?
I think the number was with 2 cars per vehicle, there's 234.
So 234 would be the maximum. And those are people standing and people sitting.
I believe that's a seated number, but one thing to clarify as a part of that as it relates to the ridership forecast and the span of service throughout the day. This is not to, in a ridership forecast, is not suggesting that every, as Mr. Braylon mentioned, every train is not full. And not everybody that gets on the train at Watsonville is going all the way to Santa Cruz. And so when we look at the boardings at different points along the line, yes, there will be people who disembark at points along the line as well. And what systems and agencies do is look at what that span of service is, the number of trains, the number of seats that are available, what we can tell from modeling about the times of day that people are traveling, and making sure that at the points that there are peaks and what we see ridership looking for, that we have the capacity to carry those people. Again, as we go through this process, that will be an ongoing part of the evaluation, particularly as we continue to add in additional information as it relates to the general plans and the other plans that have been adopted that inform that model.
Sure. You know, I think for many people who are proponents of this kind of clean train idea is that a lot of people would potentially be moved in the mornings and in the afternoons to get them off the highway, right, in cars that are potentially, you know, polluting. But it doesn't, to me, if you can only send 2 cars with 234 people every 60 minutes, or right? Maybe I'm not doing the math right. It's 45 minutes up, and then the train has to return. What is the length of time from end to end with stops at every station?
So that's the time that's the 40 to 45 minutes.
That's 40 to 45,
Yes,
okay.
and what the calculation does when we talk about, for example, the 30-minute service, is it assumes that at any stop along that line, every 30 minutes, you're going to have a train going in the direction that you're headed, and those vehicles cycle through the system. So what the modeling does and the operations does is it looks at the time to get from Watsonville to Santa Cruz. The train takes a short break for the benefit of the operator, for example, in Santa Cruz, and then it makes the return back the opposite direction while other trains are headed the direction it just came.
So it would remain parked there until the next train came up the line? Is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
No, there would be trains passing regularly along the line. In essence, a train would leave Watsonville every 30 minutes and continue to Santa Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
When it gets to Santa Cruz, there would be a short break. The train would then leave Santa Cruz and again make the trip back. Along the line on the route, as you look at the maps that are there are places where there are sidings that have been identified, so that the train coming one direction can get out of way to allow the train going the opposite direction to pass. And in that way, it's a continual loop between the two cities.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. So given the situation that we find ourselves in with federal dollars seemingly non-existent right now, we've had multiple grants pulled back. We're a sanctuary county. We're basically all sanctuary cities in this jurisdiction. So not only is California a target, then the sanctuary areas are targets. I don't see that we're going to be getting any federal grants anytime soon unless you know something different. What are the prospects of pulling down any federal money at this point?
So there's still a lot that is unknown about the programs and how they're going to be administered under this administration. I will tell you that from the Secretary's office, they've made it clear that they are still planning to invest in large infrastructure as they move forward. But I also emphasize a comment that your director made as well as Mr. Gerbrandt about the timing and the work that's required to get through this process. There's a certain amount of this work to advance the project, including the environmental work, that you need to continue to do to qualify for that federal funding. It's going to take a few years to get through that process. And by that time, if there's a change in administration, the rules could all change again. Okay. That's been a cyclical thing through every administration change for decades. and the rules will change. So today I cannot sit here and tell you with clarity what the rules will be at the time that you're ready to make that request for federal funding.
Thank you. And what is the biggest grant received by the RTC to date for the rail and trail?
Oh.
I think I know, but I don't want to be wrong.
For rail and trail, or?
For the corridor.
For
yeah.
the corridor.
Aside from like the initial 14 million that we got to buy the corridor.
Sure.
Like, yeah.
Well, technically, the RTC we're not the recipient. It would be County of Santa Cruz got, I believe, $67 million ATP grant, Active Transportation Program grant. That would be the largest.
Okay.
Off the top of my head.
So 67 million's the largest that we've received. We're going to need 4,200.
That's for the trail, yeah.
Yeah, with the trail. We're going to need, apparently, to complete this project, $4,280 million. That's 4.28 billion. 4,280. Right? I'm doing the right math.
Yes.
Okay.
Billion with a B.
Got it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to say is the citizens in this county have typically supported sales tax increases. However, having said that, we have PBUSD in the Mid and South County. We have 2 bonds on PBUSD, several bonds on Cabrillo, several CSA assessments for fire. PB Fire just went out for an assessment, didn't get it, so now they only have 2 people on their fire engines, and they can't actually go into a burning building if they arrive because they only have 2 firefighters because they didn't get the assessment they needed because the citizens in that area are tired of paying extra taxes. The cost of insurance, people's insurance, my 2 neighbors have been canceled on either side of me. I'm just waiting any day that I'll be canceled too. They're on the FAIR plan now. It's almost $12,000 a year for them to insure their homes. People are tired of shouldering the burden of communities that can't make ends meet. We've got a metro system that is running at deficit and has been at a structural deficit for several years. In my district, there's many bus stops that have no shelters. So it just makes me kind of laugh when we talk about a nice train station that's going to have a shelter and blah, blah, blah. I have need for bus stops in my area, which I don't have. Sarah, you have the most experience out of anybody, I think, on your team. You're an engineer. You've been doing this a long time. I'm going to ask you right now, do you think this is feasible at these costs? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I feel like you actually know better than many people.
So I will not say this project is infeasible. I will say any project is feasible with enough money and enough community support. Mm-hmm. And so if, this is an ambitious project, you are correct. This project is very expensive for our community. But if we prioritize this project over other needs and we are serious about delivering this project, our team is going to figure out how to get it done.
Okay, so I'm going to say 2 more things. The first thing is any effort to take money away from roads and infrastructure, I would never support that. We're underfunded in our infrastructure needs and our road repair. I've got constituents everywhere in District 2 that are furious about the condition of their road, and I don't blame them. So I would not be in favor of swiping any of the road funds in order to push it towards the rail project. That's number one. And then number two, we have a way to preserve the rail line right now for future, and that's called rail banking. And I've asked, and I think Eduardo's asked for a report to come to this full board, and so that the public can hear what it is, what it affords, and if it's possible for us in this situation. If we're aiming to build this thing out in 15 years, I'll be 73. My husband will be 85. I don't think it's feasible at these costs, but I think if we want to preserve the rail line, we need to maybe look into figuring out a way to preserve the corridor for the future. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have just one more comment. If you're going to bring it back for comments, I can wait, but
Yeah,
one
I
final.
can wait because I got Commissioner Kelly that.
Of course. No, this is just sort of my final comment on it, and just to keep up with the math prowess of my colleague there, Supervisor Koenig. For those of you who have not yet become anesthetized to this number of $4.2+ billion with a B, just to put some perspective around it, that equates to the entire budget for the 4 cities in our county: Santa Cruz, Scotts Valley, Capitola, and Watsonville. Our entire city budgets would have to be dedicated to this, comparatively, for 16 years. And I just want to put that perspective around what this number means, because sometimes you look at a number like 4.2 billion, you're like, well, you know, but that's what it looks like. And that's the level of commitment. And I believe the director when she says, you know, if there's the will and the funding to do it, her team will do it. Absolutely have confidence in her and her team to do that. However, that's the level of commitment that we would be talking about as a community to dedicate to this. And that's the crux of the decision point. Thank you, Commissioner Keeley. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I could get a little bit of guidance from you. Is your intent after commissioner questions to go out to the public and get them? When that's completed, I would appreciate the opportunity. I think there might be a motion that might be helpful, but we'll do that later. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. With that, I don't see any other comments. I just have hopefully a simple comment or question. We talked about a lot of rail assumptions. What about freight assumptions?
Yes, so the project concept does include analysis of the freight rail interface. And I had some notes prepared on that. And I think you're just asking, is freight included? Where's freight?
Yeah,
what's happening to freight?
included. How is that going to be interfaced? Because every 30 minutes, how you know, how are we going to get the trains off the road? Or
So the question is, what do we do with freight if passenger rail is operating? Okay, so yes, so the executive summary does have a section on it. The project concept does cover it. In summary, we looked at how freight and passenger rail would work together. 2 strategies we've identified for how that would happen. One is what we call temporal separation, which is operating at different times. So freight would operate at one time, passenger rail at a different time. They wouldn't intermix. Another is what we call alternative approaches under current Federal Railroad Administration existing programs. If you want more information, Mark can elaborate, but it's basically using kind of some existing alternatives for making them work together. Key thing is we're going to continue to coordinate on how to preserve the future interoperability of freight and passenger rail, so they both will be able to coexist.
do we have any assumptions that there is any vendors, usage?
Say that again?
Like any usage? Is there like, currently there's only like vendors from Watsonville to south. Do we foresee any future, people using the red eye for freight?
So there's been ongoing usage for freight, and there's been, consistently usage in city of Watsonville. There's current vendors. The freight operator is always looking for new vendors. They tell us, the current operators tell us that, yes, they do get inquiries every year from new people looking for new opportunities. So yes, they exist. One of the challenges with expanding is getting consistent interest from markets north of Watsonville because of current infrastructure conditions on the rail line. So assuming that challenge goes away, then that opens up, opportunity for additional vendors and additional markets.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to go out to the public to weigh on this item of the agenda. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Bill Beecher again. What I've done for you is to do a reverse analysis, which says they're going to spend a certain amount of money. What do you have to charge per patron to cover your costs? And so on the second sheet that you have in front of you, I've got a fair price to break even. There's a typo. The 1240 is supposed to be 1740. If you got 6,000 riders, you've got to charge $17.40 to break even. If you only have 3,500, you got to charge $25.50. That's to break even. But how do you pay back your investment? You got to charge more than that. Because you got a huge investment, you got to pay it back. Now, by comparison, Metro is $6. That's what you're competing against. Highway 1's being widened. Bus lanes going in. That's competition. That's not factored in here. So if I picked a price of $10, you'd lose for a fare. You'd lose almost $22 million a year. If you use $12, you'd lose $15 million.
Thank you.
Pocket.
Thank you.
So who will pay? My
Thank
time's
you.
up?
Time's up.
Fair enough.
Thank you, staff and commissioners, for your time. Really appreciate that. Is it better to buy a $25 pair of hiking boots I can afford today that will last 2 years, or save for 2 years and buy a $400 pair that will last 30 years? How long will my investment last? $4.2 billion is a lot of money, but let's ensure we are evaluating this cost over time. Short-term thinking is short-sighted. The lifespan of rail infrastructure can last up to 100 years before needing to be upgraded or replaced, whereas the lifespan of asphalt highway is around 17 years. So looking at the cost per mile of other programs, Salt Lake City at $54 million per mile, Sacramento $289, we fall in around $180 with these huge amount of contingencies we talked about. It's exciting, actually, some of the ridership numbers. I just want to point back to the hidden costs. There's a lot of hidden costs that we don't incorporate. Equity, the lack of ability for many of our community members to not afford a car that costs about $14,000 a year for those who can afford a car, environmental benefits that we get from rail that we don't get from driving cars. We need to get cars off the roads. Thank you for that time.
Thank you.
Commissioners, alternates, and staff, my name is Saladin Sale. I commend staff for your work on the draft Zeppert summary. You've broken down the most contentious and indigestible project of a generation into chewable parts. What's now most apparent to me is the inevitability of rail transit on the county's last unused travel corridor. The automobile era is ending, regardless of propulsion system and driverless or not. There'll simply not be enough room on existing roads if we continue to refuse to prepare for those to come. Of course, funding for construction and operations needs to be identified and secured, but those who claim to know now that future federal funding will dry up have the same credibility as all fortune tellers. Admittedly, these are historically unprecedented times, and I don't know for certain that in 5 years we won't all be living in the failed isolationist kingdom of Trumpistan. But I believe in America and those who say, yes, we can and will build a better world. Thank you.
Hi, Isabella Blevins with the Pajaronian in Good Times. I would like to know at what speed the train will travel because, to make the 45-minute trip from, north to south and vice versa. And there are a lot of intersections along the route. So looking for an answer either from the RTC or HDR.
Thank you. That's not the way it works, but
Oh.
they'll give you, they'll probably provide your comment. Thank you.
Will there be a time that I can ask these questions?
Afterwards, after the.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Sarka, representing Roaring Camp Railroads. I'm happy to be here in Watsonville because we are your freight operator here, and freight continued up north, and we picked it up at the depot up until the storms of 2017. The future of freight is incoming. But I do want to say that we do keep up with the industry, and we know that there are a lot of grants. Last year, the FRA CRISI grants were multiple billions. This administration is not going to go on forever. I think we have a lot of potential. I would like to also thank the staff so very much for all of the work that you have done. It's remarkable how you have chewed up this massive project. And the commissioners have also really helped us. We enjoyed meeting with the North County Focus Group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, commissioners and staff. Thank you for the presentation tonight and for all of the work that you've done. I would just say I'm not a Fort person or a Trail Now person. I'm a taxpayer. And I got to say the tax and bond fatigue in this county is insane right now. And you're going to wake a sleeping giant if you bring these things onto a ballot measure in November. And it's going to be a lot bigger than the factions that have opinions about this. It's going to be a really frightening day. I've never voted against any tax or bond measure, maybe a couple times in my entire life. I'm an advocate for education. I'm an advocate for so many things. You're going to make my voting really easy. I'm just voting no on the ballot on every tax and bond measure until the leadership in our government and county that is overseeing things makes sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brian Peoples with Trail Now. I want to recognize Commissioner Koenig, Commissioner DeSerpa, and Commissioner Clark for coming out and speaking the truth and recognizing this is truly where hopefully the final nail in the train. And at the end of the day, the issue isn't actually whether we'll have a train or not. The issue is we're not using the corridor today. We're not using the corridor today because we're refusing to pull the tracks up and use those tracks. You've already heard they can't use the tracks, they can't use the trestles. That's what the issue is. Our people, we're suffering. Our community's suffering. We could have had that trail years ago at a fraction of the cost. And what you're doing is you keep stopping the trail from getting built. That's the problem that's for us. The evidence is already showing you're not going to have a train, but we do need to rail bank and use that corridor. It's all about land use, the best land use for that property. Please use the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Jack Brown, Aptos. I'm speaking today to urge you to show leadership, not pass the buck when it comes to this project. In 2022, this board voted 11-1 to fund a $9.6 million study to answer one question. Is passenger rail financially and operationally not feasible, but reasonable? Now, after years of work, the answer is in, and it's clearly no. The costs are staggering. The grant funding outlook grim, and the ridership projection is paltry at best. I previously supported putting transportation tax measure on the ballot to help fund rail. I believe the community deserved a chance to weigh in if the project was viable. And as shown as preliminary report, it is not. It is my understanding that some commissioners are saying, let's take it to the voters. Ignores the very process you set in motion. A ballot measure would also deepen divisions in our community. We saw that damage in the Measure D campaign. I was part of that. The central question is not whether the idea polls well, it's whether it works, and the study says it doesn't. You have the facts, you can.
Thank you.
Please don't come to this to the voters. That's not leadership. That's avoidance.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Barrett.
Press the button.
Hi, my name is Robert Berge. I've been living in Santa Cruz for 25 years. Did my PhD at UC Santa Cruz, worked on the Human Genome Project, and I left the project to actually work on transportation. I started a company. We raised $50 million, and I'd like to offer to the council the opportunity to build an alternative technology, not build rail, but build personal rapid transit. We've built a test track in Southern California. It operates at 1 second headways. We could actually do probably 20% ridership, 20%. So I bought the database of all the car trips in Santa Cruz, cost me $20,000. There's, within 1 mile of the stations along this corridor, there's 220,000 car trips per day. So 6,000 ridership represents a 3% reduction in car trips, which is basically nothing. What I'm proposing is 20% ridership. And I'd love to engage with Manu and Justin. Your question was right.
Thank you.
What else is available? Thank you.
Yeah, Mike Morrissey from Capitola. Let me make a statement of the obvious. Hope is not a strategy, okay? It's not. Not the first one to say that, but it's a universal truth, right? We can't hope for funding to just, miraculously arrive one day, especially in the current environment. The federal deficit is at $37 trillion in 2025. It's going to be in the 40s when this administration ends, and by the time this project gets even started, it could be in the $50 trillion range. We need leadership at all levels of our government, federal, state, local, and county, to put a stake in the ground and say we're going to stop frivolous spending. That's on you guys tonight. Okay, the taxpayers are sick of seeing wasted money go out the door and having nothing to show for it. California is the worst offender here. You guys can change that, and you can change that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm actually a school teacher in Capitola, and I've seen tonight something that is really amazing to me, that you would consider taking the funding and continuously spending more, realizing that this project is not feasible, that you would even consider $18 million more dollars spent when we have homeless. We have over 1,800 homeless every night that need a place to stay. We have children who are riding on, right now in Capitola, on a road that's being built, and in the process, there's no bike lane. And those students could have been on a trail where they could have been riding safely. I have no more seconds. Just sometimes you need to speak with your heart. Look where your funding's going. It should be going somewhere for the people of this place, this community. Thank you.
Good evening. I wanted to thank everybody for the report. It's really interesting. The summary, we read the summary. I went to the Monday night meeting. It was very interesting, but I'm wondering when the full report will be available, when, where, when can we dig into the details here? That $4.8 billion does sound like a lot, but then, we looked at the comparison to the cost of highway widening, and then it starts to look reasonable. According to the RTP, the auxiliary lanes from Soquel to State Park Drive are going to cost about $1 billion, just $1 billion, but it's only 4.5 miles, and the expected improvement in travel time is 1 minute. Now, by that comparison, 22 miles of rail track looks like a bargain. And, if right now it's a 90-minute trip at worst between Watsonville and Santa Cruz, and you could do it in 45 minutes, well, that's your time is a significant savings, not 1 minute. So I really applaud the commissioners that are thinking about how can we do some cost savings that's responsible.
Thank you.
And compare it to other programs, other transit projects.
My name is Barry Scott. I'm in Aptos, and what isn't discussed often is the cost of not having transit. It's an individual cost for all the people stuck in their cars, having to drive, losing all that time and everything else. So it's easy if you're opposed to transit from the get-go to find ways to mathematically calculate how expensive and impossible it's going to be, but it's never factored in by consultants because it's hard to do. What is the cost of not doing that thing? I want to say too, and I mean, people who follow transit journals understand that there's supposedly a 4-to-1 return on investment of transit dollars spent. That doesn't come up when we do the, let's divide 4.28 billion by whatever the city's budgets are. So I just encourage you to stay with it. I think all of you are bright people and are asking the right questions, and this is going to take a long time, but by golly, it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt Farrell, and I would just like to say that I really encourage the commission and the staff to complete the process. I think that having a preliminary estimate without a true financial analysis of what these costs are and what value engineering they can do is not really fulfilling the opportunity to really look at this project. And again, I think if we're willing to spend $1 billion on a highway, we need to think about what we would be willing to spend to provide a real alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. One more?
Good evening, Commissioners. Lowell Hurst. I am a resident of Watsonville, but I'm also Mrs. DeSerpa's constituent. Figure that out. You know, this is a great project. The concept is even better. Moving people and restoring the corridor from, you know, it used to move a lot of tourists in another century. It used to move hundreds of tons of freight in another century, but the corridor is still there and still can be utilized. So, like FDR said, fear, all there is fear, and you shouldn't fear too much. No, he didn't say that. He said fear is, what did he say? There you go. So stop fearing and don't listen to all the hate that goes on. You know, you'll find a way to make this happen. There's a lot of people who want to get off the road and they want to get on the rail. So thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close off public comment here in the room. People in the line?
Yes. Mr. Badkalian?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. I'd just like to say that you asked for a study on the feasibility of this project. You paid $9 million for it, and you got your answer. A $5 billion train will result in a $1 to $1.5 billion local match at a minimum, or about a 2 to 2.75% increase in the sales tax, as Commissioner Koenig pointed out, which will raise the sales tax from 9.75 to 12.5%. That's $20-25. We know the cost will go up. 10 years ago, the RTC said the cost of passenger rail was $176 million. Now it's 24 times that, just for the capital. Not one of you believes this is a feasible or likely project. This is the most unprecedented waste of public money and time in the history of Santa Cruz County. I implore you to stop this madness and start working on transportation projects that benefit the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
David?
Hey, thanks for taking my call, commissioners. I just want to add some more context to how much money $4.3 billion is. Metro's annual budget, $65 million. That's 66 years of annual Metro expenditures would equal the capital cost for this train. And everyone's talking about cost savings. Does anyone know of a single municipal transportation project in the country that came in under budget The national average is 33%. In Santa Cruz, it's 50%. With high-speed rail, it's something like 280% over budget. We are not the exception. We have to, we're Santa Cruz. We're no different than any other town. It's not that we can hope hard enough to create this train. Some other cost overages, yeah. So guys, this is just a disaster. I've been fighting this for 15 years. I've watched every step of the process. In that time, my daughter's grown to 16, and we have nothing. Thank you.
David Dean.
Yes, thank you. I would like to remind everyone that this is an iterative process. It's being done in full public view. This document doesn't represent the final decisions that the RTC will have to undertake. I believe that this estimate is highly over-engineered. With 30-minute headways, a 45-minute travel time means only 4 rail vehicles need to be in operation at a time. Yet they have 5 passing sidings planned, and each of the 7 intermediate stops could also potentially serve as passing sidings. That could be up to 24 rail vehicles at a time. Yet we're talking about buying 10 rail vehicles when there's only need to be 4 on the railway at a time. Why expensive elevated railways? Why such expensive bridges? There are many examples throughout the state where bridges this size have been built for far less. What we need is for the RTC staff to right-size this project and reduce the expense of over-engineering. Public transit is incredible.
Thank you.
We have no other speakers.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close up public comment and bring it back to the commission. And Commissioner Katie wanted to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Did you want to speak, sir?
Yeah.
Did you?
I had a couple questions.
Well, why don't you do your questions?
Go ahead, Commissioner Cummins.
Yeah, first, thank you, Chair. So I guess just to follow up on some of the comments, the person from the Good Times had asked what speeds the train would travel, and just wanted to see if we could have that question answered, if possible.
So from earlier conversation, you'll recall a presentation as we developed design standards for this corridor. It was designed with the intent of being able to accommodate a speed of up to 60 miles an hour. That's not to say that the train travels at that speed, but it could operate safely at that speed. The train speeds are going to vary along the length of the line. A lot of that has to do with the distance between stations, and as the as the question was asked, the number of crossings and other things that are occurring along the line. And so that entire trip, the speed will vary. As it moves into communities, it's going to be moving at a slower rate of speed than it will in some of the stretches where there aren't as many crossings. We can certainly, as a part of a further conversation, give you more detail in terms of what those speeds would look like on a station-to-station basis.
And then, is there any opportunity for 15-minute headways?
It's not out of the question.
Okay.
However, the way that, back to the conversation about what we're defining as a baseline project and being consistent with what's in the state rail plan, the number of sidings and the numbers of vehicles in that are built around the premise that it is a 30-minute service. If it were to go to a 15-minute service, obviously there's additional sidings that would be required for trains to pass. There'd also be more vehicles required.
And then I'm just wondering, because we haven't really talked about the concept of freight and the revenue that would bring in. And so I'm just wondering, when we think about the freight component, which was kind of left out of this, like what are we thinking about in terms of how much revenue that would help bring in? Because that has been kind of excluded from it seems like it's been excluded from
I could take a shot at that. I mean, our existing line is technically an active freight line. It's not a, booming revenue generator from a freight perspective. You know, the operator that we currently have sent us a notice back in, 2021, that they intended to kind of get out of the agreement because they were kind of losing money on the line. So, you know, unless there's a large boom of industrial business that happens in North County in the future, you know, we don't want to preclude freight from happening, but we're definitely not hanging our hat on any kind of future revenue for freight. Just to be totally candid.
And I hear you, but I also think that, you know, although we're not hanging our hat on that, there's still an opportunity there. And so, you know, I just wanted to bring that up since we did have somebody talking about, you know, freight funding that's been available. I think there are other opportunities. There may be potential for other opportunities. I think we just have to keep an open mind on that. May
I add, you know, freight revenue coming to Santa Cruz is very different than the potential grants available that, you know, could meld with, you know, passenger and freight. There are more, you know, the more modes you have, the more potential opportunities there are for grants. And so from that perspective, we're going to need any, you know, potential grant that is available. So.
Right. And I think that's important to acknowledge, because if we are having an opportunity for freight and passenger, I think it's just worth noting that that's going to make us more eligible for more funding. And so I think we should keep that, you know, at the top of our minds when we're thinking about the overall cost. And then last question, then I have some comments, but I did just want to ask if there's a number on how much we've paid for the highway widening and how much we anticipate the additional segments to cost. Because it was brought up by members of the public, but I think to their point, you know, when we think about what we've done in terms of the highway widening, I mean, it's not like we resurfaced all of that area. I mean, it's a very small segment. I mean, it's small in terms of the amount of area, like width, and then the length. You know, getting the cost per mile on that, I think, is also really important, and how much we've been paying for the bridges, so that we can do a comparison. So do we have those numbers at all, or can we get those numbers when this comes back?
I don't have the numbers offhand. However, the numbers that one of the community members cited sounded a little high. You know, we got a grant in 2020 to fund construction of 5 miles of the highway, and it was about $100 million. So it's, you know, the total amount for the 8 miles is, I would guess, less than $1 billion. But we could pull those details together and provide that information to you.
That'd be helpful. And then I'll end by just, you know, saying that, you know, this is a long-term effort. It's a long-term investment, and it's a marathon project that is really not going to be for us, but for future generations, you know, for a rail line that's going to last the next 100 years. And, you know, there needs to be, you know, we need to be creative around this, and we need to advocate, because one of the things that we've seen, it's in my time, you know, on city council and on the board of supervisors, is that if you're a strong advocate, money that they say is not there can appear. And we've done it for homelessness. We've been able to secure funding from the state. And, you know, I think that we really need to be strong advocates, you know, as it relates to trying to reduce the impacts of greenhouse gases on climate change and, you know, find different modes of transportation. Because I will say that, you know, I will remind us that the state does not require parking in new multi-unit developments. And a lot of the building the construction that we're going to see in terms of multi-unit housing that's going to come is not going to have parking. And so how are these people going to get around? And if we don't invest in other forms outside of bus, you know, we're going to be bringing all these people in the community, and they're going to have no way to get around. Or we're just going to have people parking on top of each other in neighborhoods, and that's going to frustrate people more than anything. So having a variety of options, I think, is really critical. And, you know, I just want to remind us that we voted on this. 2/3 of the voters voted no on Measure D, which was to, you know, include planning and continue to plan for the potential for passenger rail service. And that's what's before us today. And I think that while the numbers are high, one, I think we need to continue to get through the process and get to the end. And we need to figure out how we can get creative in terms of trying to make this happen, because it is a long-term investment. And we've invested a lot over a very long period of time as like already to this date. And so it's not like we're going to have to come up with $4.2 billion overnight. But let's, if we have a plan in place, what we've seen is that makes us more competitive to secure funding. And I think that we need to continue moving through this process so that we can be more competitive and hopefully get to a point where we can make this project happen. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Yeah, really quick. I was thinking about some of the different projects that have gone on from SMART to Coaster. Do any of those have the hydrogen, or is it? What I also wanted to ask if there's a kind of a timeline to transition into, sustainable rail. Is there that demand that exists like there is with cars?
So the twofold, I hear one question is there hydrogen in
Yes.
operating? And the answer is, do we have
There's like a phase out
fare service?
for rail?
We do have a hydrogen rail line that was mentioned in San Bernardino. I know it's gone through the testing, and does it operating fare service yet?
It is about to begin fare revenue service. It has just gone through the certification process, both through CPUC and the Federal Railroad Administration for operation.
So is there a phase out in rail of internal combustion, or is it something that we're doing independently here in California?
It's not something that you're doing independently in California, but clearly California's been a leader in working towards zero emission for rail service. There is a conversation within the freight industry about hydrogen as an option. Compressed natural gas has been another option that's been looked at as well and used in some ways in locomotives, but the intent has been to phase out traditional diesel.
So the fact that it is hydrogen, is there any alternative funding sources? The way there has been sort of this federal, national, and state rebate programs for EVs.
So again, that's one of the things that's unknown as to what the emphasis of this administration will be in terms of the priority for that as an alternative fuel source, if we were to begin or be requesting grant funding today. But we don't know where that program will be in a couple of years when you're to the point of asking for significant funding through the program.
Well, I think after seeing these almost 2 years, the next 2 years from now, we're going to have hopefully a pendulum swing. I think that we're really going to have to think different and sort of maybe even consider, collaborating more with TAMC, because they're going to be doing the same thing. Metro collaborating with MST, sort of at some point creating this large transportation district, to see if we can get more funding, collaborating with each other. But I agree with Commissioner Cummings that, Commissioner Super mentioned that she's going to be 72 when the project gets done. But, I think that for me, I see it as sort of something that can be done for our children and our children's children, thinking out those 3 generations forward. And I would hate to be the person that killed the project that is going to be needed in 35 years, 40 years. And we're going to have that same congestion that's there right now. So, that's my thinking. And, I'm optimistic, and I do have hope. That this administration changes, that the pendulum's going to swing, and that there's going to be more funding opportunities for cleaner transportation. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Cayley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the staff, thank the commissioners for thoughtful comments today, and the members of the public, both who called in and who are with us today, for their continued involvement in this and thoughts. Mr. Chairman, it seems to me, and I could be very wrong because I'm wrong often, but it seems to me that what has happened on this is we had a vote several years ago about, do we want, as a community, to fund a range of options going forward with regard to transportation and transit in our community for a variety of reasons, and the voters said yes to that. Then a while later, they said there was a question. This is my interpretation of it. Do you want to stop that at this point with regard to some component parts or not? And the voters, I think at that time, given what was in front of them, they said, no, we don't want to stop now. Not yet, anyway. We'll reserve that right later. But here now, under what we understand to be the facts, no, we don't want to do that. I think, at least an observation of this, is that the time, I think, Mr. Chairman, has come where we want to braid together the issues around sort of the engineering and, stations and times and headways and frequency and, rolling stock and O&M and all of that. We're deeply in that. But if I understand correctly, what's in front of us tonight is an executive summary of a more complete report with appendices and so on that will be, am I right, Ms. Christensen, available both to us and to the public in August. Is that correct?
That's correct. Before August, we plan to release the concept report.
Okay. So the basis upon which this report was prepared, that will then become available. People can debate and discuss, is the number accurate, where'd this come from, and so on and so on. But I think we're now into orders of magnitude that we're pretty clear about. This isn't going to be $1 billion. It's going to be 4 or more. So then the question becomes, assuming we pursue this, and it seems to me that what we've heard from our executive director, from our consultants, is that something between 20, 30, and 40% of some number around $4 billion, we are going to ask that burden be carried locally. And so it seems to me that as that information becomes clearer and clearer, it is appropriate for us to ask as a commission for our staff and our consultants, concurrent with the release of that report, which has all the details in it, and that was the basis of this executive summary, that we simultaneously get back from our staff and our consultants a report which says, assuming 40%, assuming 30%, and assuming 20% local share of cost of this, both the capital and, as I understand it, we have a much bigger obligation on the O&M side because there isn't state or federal funding to reduce that, but that'll all be on us. And some portion between 20, 30, or 40% of the capital outlay cost is, in fact, somebody is going to ask our voters to bear that burden at some point. I think it is time then to braid these two together, because this notion of how much would it cost for local share of cost hasn't been something that we have facts to be able to back up our best estimate of then what that burden would look like, assuming for a moment, as the supervisor said, and as I think our executive director said, we don't have tax authority beyond looking at sales tax. We're not a property tax sharing entity. We don't have a way to get to that. We don't have parcel taxing authority that we could put on about. We have one tool in our toolbox, as I understand it right now, and that would be our sales tax. So, Mr. Chairman, if you think it's appropriate, I would like to offer a motion for how we might braid those together, if you consider.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would move that the executive director, in consultation with the appropriate fiscal folks that work for us, to prepare and present a report as follows. Number one, using the data in the full, what I call item 31 report on our agenda, calculate the local share of capital and O&M costs. Number two, assume 3 scenarios, a 20% local share, a 30% local share, and a 40% local share on the capital cost side, and 100% on the O&M side. Number 3, to provide a table assuming numbers 1 and 2 that I just mentioned of taxes that would fit that model so that we can see, that is my motion, Mr. Chairman, and then I'd be glad to explain the motion if you want. So I'll wait unless there's a second or not a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could open on the motion, thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, I think what that would do is simultaneously sort of even up, if you will, the conversation around the costs and how that might be paid for. And I think it's time to daylight that. I'm not sure it was time to daylight that before. I'm not sure we had enough information to be able to say that, be able to get to a serious conversation, adult conversation about that. But I think if we get that report concurrent with the release of the underlying document in item 31, that then changes the nature of the conversation. I don't think it's going out on a limb here saying that we all want things in our life, and some of those things we have the resources to pay for, and some of them we just don't, we want and we can't pay for. And I don't think that's different in our public agency life either. I think lots of folks love the idea of a train for a wide variety of reasons, and they may be willing to share that local share costs and carry that burden. I don't know that. But I think if we do this way and braid these together in terms of timing, we then get a fact-driven, serious conversation about that component. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's, that's a good proposal to, so we can get, because from my standpoint, it's like the more information we can, output to the community, we can have a better conversation, and, have a decency. And I just want to thank everyone in the room and everyone online for being very respectful during this conversation. I know there's passion on both sides, so I just want to thank everyone on my behalf and the commission's behalf. I think, that everybody's been very cordial and very forthcoming in their opinions and questions. Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Conant?
Well, first of all, Mr. Keeley, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think it's an excellent motion to get these numbers out and have a fact-based discussion on what the local cost share would be. I would offer a friendly amendment. Maybe this is not necessary because you're already planning, staff's already planning on including it, but as I was suggesting, for the other, whatever percentage would be grant funded, we need to understand basically how competitive we will ultimately be, and that's where I was asking for the cost per rider mile or whatever it is that the FTA is going to use. I mean, it could be multiple factors, but some insight into how competitive we are versus other systems that have recently received funding. So I'd offer a request for that information and some kind of comparison as a friendly amendment to your motion.
Certainly.
Thank you.
So it's,
Mr. Chair.
so it becomes a part, Commissioner?
Yeah, I too would like to offer a friendly amendment to the motion. It seems if we heard from staff and our consultants earlier that some of the grants really only offer a 50% match. And so, or offer a 50% funding, 50% match. So to that end, to item number 2 on Commissioner Keeley's motion, that we go ahead and do both the 20, the 30, the 40, and the 50% to cover that discussion that we had earlier, so we know what that number looks like as well. And that would be my only request.
Yes, I consider that a friendly amendment. Okay. Yes, Mr. Chairman,
So,
thank you.
So it's, so that's, any other add-ons? Only adding requests. Seems that we're pretty much on the same page. Seeing no other questions, and do you have any questions?
Just going to be a busy summer for staff, so that's great.
With that, let's, everybody in favor, say aye. Aye. All those in the negative? None? So it passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for them. So we're going to move on to our next agenda, which is item, I lost my, 32. 2025 Consolidated Grant Evaluation Criterion Process.
Let's see. I'll give it a minute. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, Chair Montesino and Commissioners. My name is Amy Naranjo, and I'm a transportation planner on your staff. Tonight, I'll present the proposed evaluation criteria and the schedule for our upcoming 2025 consolidated call for projects. Next. As she loads the next slide, I'll go on and continue. So as the state-designated regional transportation planning agency for Santa Cruz County, the RTC is responsible for selecting projects that receive state and federal transportation funds. The regions must use a competitive, performance-based process to select projects, aligning our programming decisions with the regional transportation plan priorities. The RTC addresses these requirements by periodically revisiting criteria used to evaluate projects, programs, services, and planning efforts. This process ensures that investments align with the RTP's goals and policies, which maximizes the efficiency and the cost effectiveness of the RTC's limited discretionary funds.
Can we pause you for a second? Because we don't have your presentation on our screens, by the way. We have just welcome to Watsonville. Yeah.
So we lost our tech. I'm not sure where the Watsonville tech went, and I don't have control of their system, but we do have it up in this screen. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, I only have a couple of slides, and so hopefully it'll be pretty quick. Let's see. So then, like I was saying, our competitive selection process, we evaluate the project benefits, which includes review by our advisory committees, and then we conclude the whole process with a public hearing. And then once we have approved projects, they're then programmed into our Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or the RTIP, and then are included in the RTC's budget. We can go to the next slide, please. So the projects are evaluated to ensure that they meet objectives and policies outlined in the RTP, along with the state and federal guidelines. The proposed evaluation criteria for this upcoming call for projects, which we're seeking your approval for tonight, are grouped into two main categories: project benefits and other considerations. So the first set of evaluation criteria focus on the benefits. This includes access for all, or generally expanding affordable and convenient multimodal travel options. The next is collisions and safety, looking at options to reduce transportation-related injuries and fatalities. And then next is health and equity. And this objective is to enhance healthy and safe transportation options and ensure that equity priority populations are not disproportionate or impacted. Next, we have a system performance and system preservation. Both of these really are specifically on the roadway. So for system preservation, it's to maintain and improve our roadway conditions and the surface resurfacing, for example. And then system performance is really looking at improving the efficiency of the system. So examples include improving travel times or reducing congestion. And then the last kind of bucket there is the climate change and resiliency goal. And that one's focusing really on reducing vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases, and looking at opportunities where projects incorporate climate resilient infrastructure and elements into their projects. And so these are very expansive objectives and goals, and so we recognize that not every project will address every single goal or objective. However, the projects that offer the most benefits to the community will likely be scored higher and have a more favorable rating in the review process. Next, please. And then the next set of evaluation criteria we're referring to as our additional considerations, and these really focus on the project's overall readiness and the broader impact of the project to the community. And so that includes complete streets integration, the opportunities for public engagement that the sponsor has conducted throughout the life of the project readiness. Is this ready to go to construction, or is it ready to use the funds if awarded? And then the next opportunity is just leveraging funds, how will the project sponsor use the RTC's discretionary funds to maximize the impact and maximize those funds? And lastly is just the consistency with other plans. So is the project consistent with the RTP? Is it consistent with active transportation plans and other plans that are specific to that area? And then lastly is just the scale of benefits. And so how many people or how much of the region will this project impact, and will it have a broader impact over the overall region or a localized area? So next. So our scoring approach for project applications is ranked between high to low, and some options in between, and then a none if the category is not relevant to that particular project. We're emphasizing a data-driven approach, and so projects that provide strong data-supportive narratives, as well as using recent crash data, intersection data, and so forth, speed data, for their claims will all receive higher scores. And those that lack robust data will likely be ranked lower. But our aim is to make the best choices that align with our transportation plan goals and provide the greatest community benefits. Next, please. So for this upcoming call for projects, we anticipate between $10 to $17 million that'll be available between fiscal year 2026-27 through fiscal year 30-31. So for the first bucket of funding, we estimate between $6 to $8 million for the 2026 STIP, or the Surface Transportation Improvement Program. And the exact figures will be confirmed at the end of the month with the CTC's approval or the review of the draft fund estimate for the STIP. And then the final fund estimate will be available in mid-August. So for now, we have just a range. The second set of funds is the local partnership program, and we have approximately $1.1 million available to program through fiscal year 28-29. And these funds in particular do require a 50-50 match. And then the last set of funds are our most flexible group of funds, and this is the Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG, or Regional Surface Transportation Exchange Program, the RSTPX. And so we'll have anywhere between $3.5 to $8 million available between fiscal year 26-27 through fiscal year 27-28. And the exact amount is just contingent on funding estimates and then repayment of RSTPX funds that were used to cover the rail storm damage expenses while the RTC awaits reimbursement decisions by FEMA. Next, please. And so some of the eligible projects that are available for these groups of funds are really, these are our most flexible groups, our flexible set of funding sources. And so eligible project types include, access and safety improvements, active transportation, so bicycle and pedestrian facilities, community transportation services, transit, paratransit, rail projects, roadway system preservation, so roadway rehab projects, resurfacing projects, highway projects, road projects, bridge projects. There's quite a few projects that are all available through this program. And then in addition to that, there's also non-infrastructure projects that we can fund. So that includes transportation demand management programs, bicycle and pedestrian safety education, and then just other planning efforts in general. So next. So in addition to this, the funding, the flexible funding sources, the RTC also has discretion over certain funds that are available solely for transit use. And these funds include the State Transit Assistance Program. We have one block of funds that are competitive funds of those. And so RTC has discretion over 15% of those funds. And so for the coming fiscal year, there's about $400,000 that'll be available for transit through the STA competitive. The next set of funds are the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, or the LCTOP. And this funding source is for transit projects that reduce greenhouse gases and improve mobility. And we estimate that we'll have approximately $650,000 available in this fiscal year for that particular program. And then the next funding sets here are the State of Good Repair. And so those are for transit infrastructure repair and service improvements. And we estimate about 460 will be available. And then lastly, there's the FTA 5310 program. That's for enhancing mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. And we don't have an estimate for that one at this particular time. And so for both of those two, the SGR and the FTA funding pots, there'll be a separate call for projects for those, mainly to align with Caltrans' deadline of getting those applications in September. And then lastly, we have TDA and STA formula funds. And so these funds are, in particular, they're not part of the discretionary pot, but they are apportioned and allocated consistent with formulas, eligibility, and requirements established by the state law and RTC's rules and regulations. And then TDA and STA formula fund claims are reviewed by the RTC in each spring before the upcoming fiscal year, and the last claims that you approved were at your May meeting. And so, well, it's not possible to line up the programming schedule for all transit funds with the 2026 RTIP adoption schedule. Staff does recommend including the STA competitive and LC top funds in the consolidated call for grants. And this recommendation is in addition to what was stated in the staff report. So it's a slightly new recommendation, but it just in kind of to add to the consolidated grants and to kind of try to align schedules and staff time there. So next, please, we'll go on to the schedule. And generally, I'll provide an overview of the schedule. We'll issue the call for projects at the end of the month, so on June 30th. That's after we get the STIF estimate, so we'll have a better range for that funding source. And then in September 15th, project applications will be due. Our evaluation team will review those applications the following week, have a thorough review and pretty expedient review so that we can get preliminary recommendations prepared and then going to the RTC advisory committees in October. And then we'll bring our final recommendations for your approval and your consideration at the November 6th meeting. And at that meeting, we'll have a public hearing. And then from there, we'll get your recommendations. At that point, funding our projects that are funded with RSTPX funding can begin those projects. And then in December, we'll submit our projects that are awarded STIP funding. We'll submit that to the CTC for their concurrence, and then those projects will get approved in March of 2026. And then those projects that are awarded for the following year can begin the following fiscal year. And then just to bring it back here, so we'll take our recommendations in November for the November 6th meeting. And the reason we're doing that, typically in previous years, we've gone to the December meeting. However, we're trying to align our timing with the 5-year plan development for Measure D. And so it'll be giving you, as commissioners, the opportunity to vote on both of those things during the same meeting. And then my final slide, which is just the staff recommendation. So staff recommends that the commission approve the proposed evaluation criteria and the process for the 2025 consolidated grants, and consider including STA competitive and LC top transit-only funds in the call for projects. And that concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Questions, Commissioner, questions? None? I have one question.
Okay, go for it.
So does the RTC apply for any of these competitive funds?
RTC can apply for them, and we've applied in the previous cycles, and we likely will apply this time around.
For what projects?
You want to take a stab at that?
We are, let's see, well, the prior project that was on the previous item, I think we will submit an application because we have a funding need to continue with development of the rail project. And then we have potentially another application for trail mitigation on the North Coast. There's a couple of needs that we have. We're still coming up with our list, but RTC is planning to submit applications for multiple needs.
I find it kind of odd. You're the evaluating agency, and then you yourself, granting you money.
Well, ultimately, it's the commission who decides. We put together staff recommendations. Sometimes we put together multiple options. Like the last round, we had, I think, 4 different options that prioritize different things. There are a lot of needs in this region. Every city, is going to have an ask, and the transit district is going to have an ask. There are projects that, have cost overruns that, have grants secured that, we really should consider patching that hole so that we could make that project whole so we don't lose, the competitive grants that we've secured. So It will be an interesting round. It's going to be, it's going to be challenging. I foresee it being challenging, and there's expectations from every agency, I would say, just speaking with the staff about their needs, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions. So just a heads up.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now I'm going to go out to the public. I'm seeing another commissioner's questions. Anybody from the public like to weigh in items on the agenda? Seeing none. Anybody online?
Jim Helmer.
Thank you. It's been a great discussion about South and Central County requirements for transportation funding. I will share with you that on Highway 9, we have some very serious pedestrian safety issues. We had a rural highway safety planning meeting last week. There were 4 crosswalks that are already identified in the Complete Streets Plan that could probably be implemented for less than $100,000 or $200,000 with rapid flashing rectangular beacons. And to me, we really need to focus on safety on Highway 9, Highway 1, Highway 17. And I just wanted to say that District 5 needs to be represented here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We have no other speakers.
With that, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for an.
I'll move staff recommendation. Second.
So it's been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Looks unanimous. Any abstentions or? No, so it passes. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to 33 is review of items to be discussed in a closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 3 items in closed session this evening. The first 2 relate to the executive director evaluation and labor negotiations regarding the executive director. And the third one is anticipated litigation for 2 cases.
Do we anticipate any report?
There may be 1 reportable item out of closed session, depending on the commission's direction.
Okay, with that, we're going to go into closed session. So thank you. So we're back from closed session, and item 37, report I have items discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were, I think we're okay. There were 3 items in closed session this evening. There are no reportable actions from closed session.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to close the meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is August 7th, 9 a.m. in Scotts Valley. We're going to go to Scotts Valley. Hey, you better have some brews.